All right. Let's see. Is chat working correctly? Let's find out. Yo, hu bovu. There we go. Is this all working? Looks like it. We're recording. We're streaming. Everything's on. That's good. That's good. Take a second to let people roll in here. Actually, let me get something set up as well. All right, here we go. Okay. All right, let's give a moment to get some people in here. Started late and gay today, which was not fun. Not fun. Just life gets in the way, you know? Life gets in the way. There is one thing before we get into Joseph Anderson's video I wanted to watch because someone mentioned it. There's a little bit of a meme. Oh, whoops. A little bit of a meme. Let's wait for some people to get into chat here so we can enjoy every game analysis video essay ever. I figure we might include some memes in these. Oh boy. Let's see. Yeah. I kind of don't want to start watching things until some people float in. So, in the meantime, I'm just going to lay out sort of the plan with this next little arc. I think every time we do a reaction video to a game that we have a particular opinion of, I think we should play it on top of their critique, just because I think it's a fun way to space out the reaction videos as well as get some gameplay stuff in there. Because gaming is fun, and gaming on stream is fun. So right now what I'm thinking is, since we're about to go through our sort of SOMA phase with Joseph Anderson's video, I thought we might play SOMA afterwards over the next weekend or two, depending on how long it takes to beat the game. I know you can beat the game in about 8 hours, so we'll see how far we can get in each stream. I imagine with the stream input adding to the experience, it'll probably take maybe 3 streams to do, so we'll see how far we can get. Alright. I'm going to take one more sip of my delicious hot cocoa. That was totally not cheap. Totally not cheap Walmart brand. Alright. Let's go ahead and get into some of these wonderful videos we're going to watch today. We're going to start off with this one just because I've heard it's funny. So let's give it a watch here. Let's give it a watch.
Jumping is a core part of video games, from Super Mario to Super Mario 3. It allows the player to move upwards, forwards, upwards and forwards. But what makes a jump feel good? And how can developers use this mechanic in new and exciting ways? I'm Tom O'Regan, this is Game Players University, and let's jump into it.
I love these kind of like redundant questions of how can we make jumping more fun for the player? It's like it's just a simple movement, you know, and like so many people make such a big deal over minor things in games. It's kind of funny watching people make memes on that fact that people overanalyze every minor little movement thing.
The first game to feature the jump mechanic was 1988's Super Mario Bros. 2, directed by Kensuke Tanabe. And while it's easy to think of the Italian plumber as the grandfather of jumping, things are actually a little more complicated. You see, while released in the US and Europe as Super Mario 2, the game is actually just a reskin of the Japanese title, Mega Man X. And so it's actually the Blue Bomber we have to thank for the gift of Ascension. But how does this jumping work, and what new opportunities did it allow for? Let's jump into it.
Oh man, the jump puns. The jump puns.
The mechanic works like this.
I'm kind of curious now. I wonder if there's like, take a shot every time he says jump as a pun. We're up to 2. Let's see how drunk people get.
The player, that's you, would press the B button to gain altitude, or pair that with the left or right buttons on the D-pad or directional pad to perform a lateral movement. In retrospect, this might seem shockingly simple, but back in 1786, gamers had never seen anything like it.
1786. That shows whatever this clip is. This reminds me of Mahler's Gedelb series, where it's just a meme of just every line is a joke, and every clip on top of it is a joke on top of that joke. So it's just like a meme repository.
So how did this simple yet revolutionary new idea change the gaming landscape as we know it? Well, let's jump into it.
Jump joke number 3.
Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung once said, "Nothing has a stronger influence, psychologically, on their environment, and especially on their children, than the unlived life of the parent." Now,
That's a interesting like quote that I feel is made up, just because this is a joke video. Also, going back to that picture, I liked how it's Carl Jung 31 AD. It's like he's just wearing like a sweater vest shirt. Let's get this full quote on
children,
screen.
Than the unlived life of the parent.
There we go. Nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on their environment, and especially on their children, than the unlived life of the parent. It's like that just is one of the perfect encapsulations of like how to meme on like the video game essay crap, because a lot of the ones I've seen are just very vapid in terms of actual points being made. It's just word salad from beginning to end. And this meme does a good job of pointing that out by putting a phrase that's like, nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on their environment, and especially on their children, than the unlived life of the parent. And it's like, what does that mean? It's like, well, I guess kids are impacted if their parents don't live their lives. Which, do you mean that literally? I don't know. Like, what's the point? How does this deal with jumping? Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
Now, you might be wondering what this has to do with jumping in video games. With jumping having now fully hit the mainstream, developers all over the world are putting their own unique spin on this brave new mechanic. Now you can jump off walls, jump on your hat, sometimes even jump and then jump again. What exciting new territory will these developments uncover? Only time will tell. Hey, thanks for watching. Game Players Unite.
I like how that was just vague and... I like that. Tom O'Regan, a dumb idiot. Good meme video, dude. Good meme video. I wonder if these are actual patrons or if he just like inserted names.
University is funded in part by Patreon, where I earn $26,000 a month somehow.
That's a good joke, too. Earning $26,000 a month.
If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe or even consider donating. Leave a comment in the description letting me know your favourite jump, and check out my previous video on how level 1-1 teaches you how to play.
That was a good meme. That was a good meme. Good meme. Good meme. Alright, I need to make a note that I watched that, because otherwise I'm going to completely forget about it. Alright, what are we doing here? I need to check something real quick. I need to check something. Is the stream going? Yeah, it's public. It's working. Let's see here. Is anybody in the chat right now? I wonder if my chat's broken. That might be something. Let me try to fix this real quick, just because I don't think my chat's linked to the right stream at this point. Okay, there we go. Okay, yeah, I've got the wrong chat. That's funny. That's funny. That did not work the way I wanted it to. All right, so I screwed that up. That's fun. Hey sheep, I'm trying to fix things while I figure out what I did wrong. There we go. Get this sorted out a wee bit. Yeah, I think for whatever reason, just when I connected pieces of this stream together, I think some of it's screwed up. Like normally whenever I start a stream and then open the thing to get the chat working, like they're linked, but I guess it created a separate stream for some reason. That's strange. Anyway, hey sheep. They're coming out with another FromSoft game. Oh great, I totally care. But okay, where's the display at? There we go. Make sure chat's working properly. I am alive! Okay. It's okay, Vangaris. You can say that you're ignoring us. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to ignore my friends. I am filled with sadness and regret. Anyway. Yeah, so just watch that little meme video, which is pretty funny. I particularly like the joke at the end where he says, "I follow my Patreon, where I somehow make $26,000 a month." I was like, it's so true. People are so generous, but there are so many like causes that are not worth giving money to. On a lighter note, I just platinum Resident Evil 8 and its DLC. It was very painful. Ah, glad you enjoyed. A Nintendo exclusive that's totally not BB2. I don't really care about Nintendo, so you'll have to fill me in on what BB2 is. But, yeah. Oh, is this referring to, like, the FromSoft thing? Or, like, are they going to do, like, some port of a previous game for Nintendo or something. Bloodborne 2. Bloodborne: The Hunting Again. Can you imagine like if they actually did a Bloodborne 2 and they gave it like a really stupid title like Bloodborne Reborn or something dumb like that? It's basically a Bloodborne game for Nintendo. It reuses a lot of assets. Yeah. Well, I imagine it'll probably be Bloodborne but scrunched down to where there's only like 5 bosses and like 2 areas to go through. I mean, if they wanted to, they probably could just take the entire like Hunter's Dream DLC, scrunch it down, and then put it on Nintendo. It probably would sell decently just because, you know, with a couple tweaks, I mean, you can basically make that however you want it. You know, just give the player a choice of where to put like their first 100 levels or however many levels you're supposed to have by then, and then just drop in like a max level weapon, and then you're good. It's also a PvPvE game. I always found those kind of be interesting when you mix in like the PvP and PvE thing together, where there's NPCs that can attack the player as well as other players. I've always found that kind of neat. I think I really am done though. I thought it was Bloodborne 2 and it didn't feel any hype. Shadow of the Erdtree just sucked it all out. Yeah, Shadow of the Erdtree created a shadow across the whole community at this point where it's just like they're quadrupling down on what they've already done. So it's like, I don't have faith anymore. I mean, I would not be surprised if they like because here's the thing, right? I know that they've had a lot of problems with Sony throughout the years, but if Sony actually buys them, then they are absolutely going to be either pressured or forced to make franchise decisions again. Kind of like what they did with Dark Souls, right? Where they had Dark Souls, it was a big success. You know, then Sony wanted a piece of that action, so they make a deal with them to like, or they continue the deal they had with Sony to, hey, make an exclusive for us. Then they make Dark Souls 2 and 3 just to continue the franchise and stuff. And again, like I actually don't have a problem with franchises, but when they drag out for too long, that's when you get the big issues. Night Rain is something different, at least. I mean, if Night Rain was much cheaper and free, I wouldn't have such a problem with it. But costing $40 for like repurposed assets just seems like a really shitty business decision to me. They're probably waiting to force people to buy a PlayStation 6 before making a Bloodborne 2. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's we should be getting close to that time. I mean, because every console generation usually lasts about 5-ish years. I know PlayStation 3 era lasted a lot longer for whatever reason, but, you know, like we had the PlayStation 3 for a long time, then we had the PlayStation 4 for a while, then we had PS5 in, like, what, 2020, I think, was when it came out. So we're getting close to that tipping over point, but I don't know. We'll see what happens with them, but yeah, I'm mainly going to be just off to the side being like, hey, they're making a game, cool. Scholar of the First Sin, PTSD intensifies. Yes. Night Rain 100% should have just been a free add-on to Elden Ring, or at the very least, way cheaper. Yeah, like it really, you know, like there's a certain element to it where it's like Shadow of the Erdtree was really expensive as a DLC, but you do get a lot of content out of that DLC, you know, in all fairness. But it is one of those things where just the price hiking of stuff recently has been just kind of ridiculous. Having it be $40, the same price as the DLC, really feels like a scam. It really does, especially when it's like repurposed assets from other games. But I'm not going to play it, and I probably won't be able to talk about it more than just what I see in trailers, so I have some PTSD related to DS2, but it's not from the game. Yeah. You know, I have more PTSD about the reaction to the game and how it sort of split the community rather than the game itself, right? I still enjoy playing the game, even though it has moments of just going, what the fuck are you doing? Like, but I still have fun with it. It's just the community around it and the divisive nature of it that kind of just brings a headache, because it's like, you know, it's like we argue over the same shit just over and over and over, and nobody seems to budge on their opinions. Anyway, Speaking of not budging on opinions, let's watch this critique of Soma by old Joe Andy. Old Joe Andy. So let's get into this and begin our Soma arc.
SOMA, like many games, can be split into two parts. There's gameplay and there's story. The vast majority of games can be segmented like this. What makes SOMA exceptional is which part it executes well. I can't remember how many times I've said to myself, well, the story is terrible, but there's some good gameplay here. SOMA is the opposite. The story here is quite literally outstanding, elevated far from the usual stuff you see in video games, but the gameplay side is a total failure.
Okay, we're already starting to get that thing where it's like, I would agree the story is the best part of Soma, but to call the gameplay a complete failure implies things that are just blatantly untrue about the game, right? We're 30 seconds in, right? I'm already making a big point. It's like, to call it a failure, like a complete failure, implies that the game is broken. Because if it's a complete failure, it is broken. It has to be broken for it to be a complete failure, which it is not. It's not broken. And we'll see that when we get to our playthrough of it later. I won't be able to do it today, but tomorrow we will have an after party with Soma. It shall be interesting and fun. I've gotten considerably better at DS2 as well. My friends called me a sweaty when I started styling on Pursuer. He's already paused LeMayo. This is going to be good. Well, we'll see. We'll see. There aren't sections to this video, so I wonder what he's going to cover in it. But let's see what he's leading up to here.
Far from the usual stuff you see in video games, but the gameplay side is a total failure. For me, that's okay. I can play some games for the story as long as that story is good. And just because the gameplay is, in my opinion, a waste of time, doesn't mean...
A waste of time? Why? What? Why is it a waste of time? I just have so many questions about how you justify these things you say, Joseph.
That SOMA fails to use interactivity in any meaningful way.
Wait a minute.
Waste of time doesn't mean that SOMA fails to use interactivity in any meaningful way. There are definitely moments that are made more poignant because it's being told in a video game that simply wouldn't have the same effect in a movie or a book. I'm not saying we should go dig up Roger Ebert so he can play SOMA, but this is one of the strongest stories I've seen in a game. SOMA is a science...
I would agree with that. It's one of those games that I have very, very fond memories of playing and interacting with the story. You won't be able to do it today. You treat us poorly, Vangeris. You do us so wrong. I'm sorry. I got a life to live outside of YouTube. I got shit I gotta do. Like, go have a pizza with family or something.
Science fiction horror game that is not nearly as scary as it may first appear. If you're
It's not nearly as scary as it may first appear. Here we go. We're getting the inklings of the main point of this video that I know people were like, what the fuck are you talking about? So let's see how he goes. Let's see how he deals with what makes something horror versus something that's scary. Because I know that was one of the biggest takeaways from this video, where people were just like, what the fuck?
easily startled and don't like that kind of experience, and you still may want to avoid it, but the story in this game is worth your time if you play games for that reason, and that's the end of my spoiler warning. The beginning of SOMA proves how important expectations and tone are when you experience anything. Virtually anyone who plays this game will find out beforehand that it's meant to be scary, a horror experience. So after the game gets through its introduction and you wake up in the main character's apartment, you are going to be immediately on edge. You might even ask, what's wrong with this picture? Why does the apartment seem so ominous even though it's normal? This may seem like a minor observation, that if you know what genre a movie or a game is ahead of time, that you will immediately start to anticipate certain things. But it's important to know for later when we get to how the game starts trying to scare you. But that's well after this introduction, because there's nothing lurking in this apartment, or the subway ride that follows it, or the eerily empty office that you arrive at.
Hello? Dr. Munchie?
Let's rewind for a minute.
This is one thing, right? I really wonder if he's going to make the point that in these early sections before shit goes down that there should be scares in there. Like, because earlier he made a criticism of like the jump scare type of sudden scare thing from that robot earlier. And I wonder if he's going to end up doing that double standard thing where he says that there isn't anything in the opening and that's bad, but later on in the game, the scares they do there are also bad. Like, I wonder if he's going to do... Because it's kind of a weird meta thing. This apartment is not normal. Where's the space? I mean, it's pretty spacious. I mean, like, all things considered, it's better than like a box. But the point I'm going for here is we have this weird meta element where he's talking about knowing that Soma was a horror game before going in and how that affects his expectations. And I know that he has very strange opinions about what makes a horror game before going into this video. So we've got this weird meta element where we're in the same place about different things. This is the thing where, yeah, nah, say it. Yeah. I need to make like a, I should make a background for my channel page where it's that, like it's a little cartoon version of me saying, it's just one of those things, ... And it's just plastered on the back of the like home page of the channel. That'd be fun. Be a lot better than bruh. I've had bruh up there since 2016, I think. Maybe 2015. Maybe that bruh is a decade old. I don't know. That's weird to think about. Anyway, let's get back into this.
Minute though. Soma is a game about a handful of things, but at the center of it all is a man named Simon. He was recently in a car accident that resulted in one of his friends being killed, and left him with a terminal brain injury. This is told in a sort of awkward way at the beginning, at first with a nightmare sequence, and then with some forced dialogue after Simon wakes up. The first few minutes of this game are
forced dialogue at the beginning. I gotta go back. Like, what is his actual... this is the problem when you give very vague criticisms to a thing. You know? A decade old, bruh. Yeah. Well, I started my YouTube channel in 2015. Way back then. I haven't played this game, but my impression of a good horror game is something that can make you feel dread, has unpredictable scares. I mean, my thing about... I guess that's probably a good thing I probably should set before we get into this, is I think a horror game is defined by what it's trying to do and the mechanics of how it tries to do those things, right? It's not necessarily whether it succeeds or fails. It's what it actually like is, right? Like, if you watch a movie that is called a horror movie and it has horror movie elements, right, of like jump scares and something is terrifying people and stuff like that, just because you don't believe it to be scary, like if you find it more funny than scary, that doesn't mean it's not still a horror movie, right? Just because your experience is different than what the intention was doesn't mean that the overall product is different from the genre it's placed in, right? You could say that it fails to do those things. You know, you could say that it fails to scare and instead comes across as kind of goofy and funny, you know, but that is kind of the like distinction that needs to be made, right? Is your perception of how the thing does its job and if it does it well are totally irrelevant to what it actually is in terms of genre. And that's something that I remember being a very strange point that Joseph Anderson makes in this video that we'll see at some point. It has a tone that can keep you on edge when it needs to be, makes you feel momentary relief in a safe space. Yeah. Well, I think it's kind of interesting when you look at horror-driven projects, right? Because there are certain elements that come... Like the biggest difference I've found between mediums that adds to the experience is the more ways you can experience the tension of a horrific situation, right? So let's compare books to movies to video games, right? So on the book end, the horror in that is usually left up to the wording and how far your imagination can take the words on the page, right? So there's very few limitations on what you actually get in terms of that picture, right? You know, like if the wording on a book says, you know, I turn the corner to find a headless man hanging strewn up by his arms, right? If I just leave it as vague as that, you guys can create multiple versions of that in your head that are varying degrees of horrifying, right? Is he decapitated? Is his head on the ground, just laying there? Is he bleeding out? Is there blood splattered everywhere? You don't know because I've not told you, but your imagination kind of runs wild with it because you don't actually see anything to confirm what you're supposed to be seeing, right? That's kind of the advantage of books, is that if the description is good and paints you a very strong picture with details, that can create an interesting experience for everybody, but you can also have a different effect when it's poorly described. You can have it be very poorly described, and people can just let their imagination run wild with it. And when we get to a movie, everything becomes much more defined because there's an actual visual to go with what is being said and what you learn through the film, right? And that's usually where horror can kind of take a step up because it realizes the visual aspect of the horror, but it can also cause problems because of things like cheap horror, right? Like jump scares or just over-the-top gore, stuff like that, right? Those problems become more prominent in the medium of film and television compared to a book because a book is describing it. It describes it in detail, right? Your imagination dictates how intense it is, right, for the most part, unless the author just goes on and on and on about describing the gore, right? But with a movie, there's a very limited sort of space of this is how long this scene lasts with these details that are meant to be horrifying, disgusting, thrilling, whatever, right? In a video game, the line between you viewing it versus you partaking of it is completely gone. You are actually in the situation dealing with it, and so you are inherently more invested in the horror of the situation and wanting to avoid whatever thing is chasing you or whatever doom is coming your way, right? Like in a video game, you're more into it because it is you. You have effectively dropped into a game where you don't want to die because that usually means a reset in progress. And it also means that, you don't live, right? And that inherent fear of when I'm in control, I want to survive kind of kicks in. And that's sort of the biggest difference between horror across like books versus like on-screen stuff versus video games is we keep adding more layers of interactivity, and that creates a deeper experience each time. That's one reason why I think horror games can be some of the most terrifying because, you're actually in the game doing things in the game, right? Take a very simple situation, right, where you're desperately trying to get away from some monster chasing you. It knows where you are and it's coming and you can hear it, but you can't see it though, and you have to do some strenuous action to open a door. Like say you have to plug in like a lever and twist it and twist it and twist it and twist it or crank something to open a doorway, right? Like that element is a good horror set piece because the tension is high because you're trying to get away from this monster while also doing something mechanically that you yourself have to do. It's not a scripted event like it is in a movie where it's, whatever happens in the movie happens and that's it. In a video game, there is always the opportunity of failure, right? Which is all down to you, which includes how you get hurt. And it was, and this is kind of the thing that I'm leading up to is I think horror video games have the greatest potential to be terrifying because of your active role in dictating the scares of it, right? I think that's part of when it comes to the best of the best, I think a great video game, a great horror video game will be better than a great horror film and will be better than a great horror book, just inherently because of the way that you can actually interact with things in the story because you're actually playing it and experiencing it. It's not just watching something and it's not just reading something. You're reading stuff, you're watching stuff, and you directly have an involvement in the situation with the game that immerses you even deeper into the game when something is chasing your character because now you are a part of the process. You are in their shoes trying not to have something happen to you. And I think that is a pro to horror video games. That is a thing that needs to be mentioned is that extra immersion element I think does help create greater tension. Anyway, I need to catch up on chat. Let's see. Yeah, he's old. Yeah, I am old. I don't like spammy jump scares, especially when they're obnoxiously loud. Yeah, and I'm kind of every time that happens, I get reminded of the Randy Marsh clip from South Park where he just goes, "I'm so startled." It's just that thing where when you rely too much on jump scares, especially when it's something that's not actually scary, it's sort of like a slap meter. It's like I know I've not watched all of them, but I know one Paranormal Activity has a jump scare where it's just a cat runs in front of the camera, and it's like, bruh. And a lot of other like really bad horror films do that too, or horror projects in general do that, where they just have something loud in your face repeatedly, right? And I've picked on Outlast in particular because it is a great example of how to make a bad horror game, because they do the exact same scares over and over and over and over across that entire game. So by the end of it, you're just fucking sick of the jump scares, and the guy's grabbing you and going like in your face, like for like 5-6 hours as you beat the game, right? Like it's one of those situations where you're using the exact same gimmick in almost every single encounter in a video game that lasts several hours. If you don't think that's going to get old over time, you might need to get your head checked. It's like, if you like being jump scared, that's one thing. But most people are going to get bored of jump scares when the jump scare just equates to some guy getting in your face and going, just over and over and over. It turns from it turns from surprising to annoying, right? And that's the biggest thing, right? A jump scare is more surprising than terrifying. Something that I would consider terrifying, is when you get a slow creeping shot of a like creature going after somebody, right? Like one of the shots that I go to is like a shot that's really terrifying to think about is in Aliens, right? When Newt is in the sewers and that alien comes up behind her out of the water. It's not a jump scare, but you know exactly how bad that situation is, because by that point you care about the character. By that point you understand the threat of the xenomorphs, and by that point shit's going down, right? It's one of those things where you're invested in the character, and when you see that monster appear behind them, you're like, "Fucking run! Fucking go, run!" You're in it, and you're in it for their survival because you care about the character and you want them to live, and you see the monster behind them. Those are good tension moments when you see the monster coming and you have an opportunity to either see the character escape them, if it's like a movie or a book, or you get to actively partake in the escape, like in a video game, for example. It's essentially the producer tickling me and pointing his finger, saying he got me to laugh. It's forced. Loud noises make people jump. Yeah. Cough. Five Nights at Freddy's. Yeah. Yeah. I gave the first Five Nights at Freddy's a try because I got a bundle of all the games for like $2 on Steam. Like, it was some crazy deal. And after the first jump scare, I was like, you know what? If this is all this series has to offer, I might just not do this. But anyway, let's get back to this video. We went on a rant for like 15 minutes.
A man named Simon. He was recently in a car accident that resulted in one of his friends being killed and left him with a terminal brain injury. This is told in a sort of awkward way at the beginning.
Okay, so this is the kind of thing I was trying to make a point of, then I went on a rant, but what does he mean by awkward? Like, what do you mean by awkward? Please do Five Nights at Freddy's. I don't know. We would all love that. Well, that's the thing. I don't know how to win the game, right? So it'd be a lot of trial and error, which I also hate in video games. I also hate the trial and error like bullshit that you get in some games. I don't know. We might see if we could do something with that in the future, but it is not high on the priority list. I want to make that clear now. I'm not entirely against doing it, but at the same time, I really don't care enough to do it either. So we'll see. Yeah, but coming back to his point about this being an awkward intro, I don't really understand what's awkward about it. Like, it's a quick way of showing like flashbacks to the event before he wakes up. So he's having like a nightmare. Where's the awkward part of it?
And left him with a terminal brain injury. This is told in a sort of awkward way at the beginning, at first with the nightmare sequence, and then with some forced dialogue after Simon wakes up. The first few
Forced dialogue after Simon wakes up. I mean, what? Like he's levying criticisms during these parts that I don't understand what the actual problem is. Like what do you mean by forced dialogue at the beginning, right? It's not forced dialogue to have someone appear that is relevant to the story and is relevant to the progression of the plot if they are naturally set up in the world to be a part of the character's like journey, right? Like if I remember correctly, you wake up and you get a call from Doctor, I think it's Munchi, right, talking about like the appointment and everything. As far as I understand, as far as I remember, there's nothing in there that's inherently like problematic with that discussion. It's like you're just partaking in the story elements of it. I don't get it.
Few minutes of this game are the weakest part of the story. The voice acting is also less than stellar here too, and the only reason I'm pointing that out is so I can commend how much better it gets as the game progresses.
Munchie, we spoke earlier.
The brain scan. I remember.
Are you all right?
Yeah, just a bad dream. Are we still on for today?
The events here are
I like how he calls it like not like particularly good voice acting. Then it's like it's perfect. It's an average conversation, so it's going to be average. Like it doesn't take a lot of emotion to respond to your doctor that you spoke to on the phone, right? You're not going to be like buddy with them, unless you've like been with them for a long time, right? Like I don't get that criticism. It comes across more as he just didn't like the voice acting in that part, so he's just like, it must be bad.
Are about Simon going to visit a doctor in training that is developing an experimental procedure that could resolve the damage left by the car crash. It's a chronic bleeding problem in Simon's brain. The doctor thinks he can use a scanning machine to identify the issue in Simon, and then run him through a rapid series of stimuli. Basically, putting a simulated version of Simon's brain through a massive amount of different treatments until one works, which can then be used on the real Simon once the simulation confirms that it's effective. You can see in this conversation that the game is still awkward here. This exchange didn't feel natural, especially given the earlier phone call and that Simon should really know all of this already. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter though.
We're going to do a scan of your brain. Then we build a computer model of it and bombard it with stimuli.
What I want to say about this
Like again, he keeps citing it as being like awkward and weird, and it's like it's a doctor going over what he's about to do with a patient in real time before he's about to do it. This is normal. Like this is normal informed consent.
This part is more about me personally, because it was really surreal at first. This game starts out in Toronto, that's where I live. The doctor here is a student at York, which is where I went to university. I also have a problem with regular nightmares like Simon appears to suffer from, and my mom died of a brain aneurysm, and I've had several scans to make sure I didn't have the same problem. So even though this was a coincidence, I felt like the game was screwing with me on a second level in addition to the usual bracing for jump scares, because I knew it was a horror game.
It's like, yeah, so good bedside manner is a bad thing? Apparently to him it is. It's weird. And also that weird like story of his is like this game, I don't know. I feel like little anecdotes like that are like a fun little thing, but upon thinking about it, it's like, do you think that affected his opinion of it because he expects this thing to sort of be in the realm of how he deals with his nightmares and stuff? Like, do you think his personal experience with stuff like sort of relevant to this plot may have skewed his opinion one way or the other? I mean, it's going to do that naturally, but like I wonder if he's aware of that, like skewing his opinion because he's gone through things similar to what like Simon goes through in the early stage. Like I wonder like how much of that affected his overall opinion.
This isn't important for the review, of course, I just thought it was funny enough to mention because the game got to me a little more than I think it would have otherwise.
You know I have a serious condition, right? You heard about...
Why don't you have fucking subtitles, man? If you're going to do recordings, put the subtitles on.
the car crash, the X months to live deal?
SOMA abruptly changes at this point, and arguably this is where the game properly starts. The brain scan commences, and when it's over, you're no longer in the doctor's office.
I like how he said this is where the game properly starts. It's like, if we don't have the introduction with the details of what's going on, then we can't explain how we end up, like, here. Like, we need this, like, the opening bits of the game are important for the setup. They set the stage. It would be like it would be like jumping into the beginning of Lord of the Rings, the movies, right when Bill like we skip the prologue, right? Like we skip the prologue and we just jump right into Hobbiton, right? And Bilbo and Frodo doing shit. It's like, yeah, like the film, we can infer things through the film throughout, but that prologue does a really good job of setting up the stakes of what's going on. And so you have that in your head as you're going through the Hobbiton bits, right? This is something similar where it's not absolutely necessary to have the opening bits before we take this brain scan, but they certainly add to the world in that respect because we have a good idea of what Simon's going through and how much pressure's on him and that he lost someone close to him during like a terrible accident, right? Right, this sets up things that come up later, you know, and it's not 100% necessary to have it here, but it does set things up and also creates a sense of normalcy that falls apart as soon as we wake up, you know, after this brain scan.
You're in some foreign industrial-looking room. It's dark, you're alone. You nor Simon have any clue about what's going on. This first area gives you a lot of hints about where you've been apparently teleported to. There's some technology that is clearly advanced despite its bulkiness. The corridors are reinforced, imposing, and abandoned. Parts of it are locked away. There are some robots, one of which promptly goes crazy and runs away shortly after you leave it alone. Your vision isn't functioning as it used to, as you can see here, and you're able to access memories from some places around the area, like you're hallucinating some sort of ghostly echo of the people that were here before you.
Oh, it's working better than expected. They're having a really hard time getting the doors open.
If you're like me, you'll immediately guess that this is the stimuli that the doctor was talking about. It's pretty obvious that this is the test he's running. Somehow it's resulted in this weird futuristic base that is a representation.
It's pretty obvious this is the test he's running. I mean, we have no idea if this is a test. I mean, that's the thing that I think is really great about this sort of, not really a twist, but this sort of like radical shift in the opening is you're going from a guy trying to get some tests run, all of a sudden you're in this crazy like industrial area that's like been abandoned and wrecked for a long time with creepy shit going on around it, right? I don't think you can certifiably identify what's going on in this situation, like period, right? Like I think that you can theorize that maybe this is part of the test that Dr. Munchie like is doing with you, but at the same time, like you can't really confirm that, right? It's just kind of a guess. I mean, it might be, but in the grand scheme, you find out it's not the case.
Of Simon's brain. The locked passages around you are blocked pathways that need to be opened in his head. Something called structure gel that appears like black blood that the robots leave behind represents the bleeding that keeps happening in his brain. The corrupted vision and the broken memories you can access are glitches, twisted versions of his own memories and the friends Simon has, along with the simulation threatening to distort or crash if he becomes too stressed out. The game will be about opening all of these pathways and then defeating whatever personification that the simulation creates to serve as an adversary for the bleeding in his brain, likely linked to the friend that was killed in the car crash at the start since he's brimming with guilt about it.
Ashley? What are you doing here?
And if you guessed all that, you are completely wrong, just like I was. I don't feel bad about this, and neither should you, because I think it was deliberate. There are two reasons why the narrative gives so much attention to Simon's life in Toronto at the beginning, and this is one of them, along with opening with a nightmare. It's misdirection, and I think it's great. It also gives you a reason to accept why you're suddenly in a vastly different place, because otherwise, really, how the hell did you get here after just being in a doctor's office?
Yeah, okay, that was one thing. Like, I thought he was treating this seriously with those points. I didn't realize that this was like his saying, this is how I thought things were going, and I was completely wrong. So, okay. That makes more sense that he was like, yeah, like this is misdirection and stuff like that. I was like, okay. I thought he was making a different sort of point.
The information you're finding says that the year is now 2104. There's seemingly no rational explanation for it. The real answer involves going through the entire plot of SOMA, which is mostly about the events that happened here in the future. The place you're in is an underwater base called Pathos 2, and it's more of a research base or a factory than Rapture was a city in Bioshock. It has several different sites that...
Wait a minute, what was that last point?
...that happened here in the future. The place you're in is an underwater base called Pathos 2, and it's more of a research base or a factory than Rapture was a city in Bioshock.
That's a weird wording. It's more of a research station than Rapture was a city in BioShock. It's like, so, I mean, yes, this is sort of a research station place, like as a whole, and Rapture was a city, so why'd you phrase it like that? It's like he's implying that this place as a base is more like a base than Rapture was like a city, when Rapture was a city and this is a base. Like I'm confused by like his like why did he choose those words to describe this place?
It has several different sites that serve different functions, and you'll go through most of this place throughout the game. So before we get to that, let's put the story on hold for a moment, for two reasons. The first is that I think the video will flow better if we can loop back to the story after looking at gameplay, and secondly because I want to show a massive problem that SOMA has before spoiling the story, just in case this problem ends up being strangely positive for a lot of you watching. This might convince you to play it yourself before I go on to spoil it, and that
Is he actively saying that it sounds good until I mention this thing? I gotta go back to what he's saying here.
for a moment, for two reasons. The first is that I think the video will flow better if we can loop back to the story after looking at gameplay, and secondly because I want to show a massive problem that SOMA has before spoiling the story, just in case this problem ends up being strangely positive for a lot of you watching. This might convince you to play it yourself before I go on to spoil it. And that problem is, SOMA isn't really a horror game.
Here we go.
It's not scary in the
Here we go. Here's the meme. Here's the meme. Isn't really a horror game, even though it deals about what makes humanity and how humanity can get fucked up when an AI is, just injecting life into whatever you can find. It's not a horror game because it isn't scary. It's like, this is one of those statements that I think perfectly describes sort of Joseph Anderson's problem as a critic. Because this opening statement is a hard objective statement saying Soma isn't really a horror game, right? That is making an objective point. This bottom part saying it isn't scary is very subjective because being scary is subjective. Now we can weigh things up as this can definitely be scary because most people will be scared by this thing in this situation, right? But it's the thing where this statement is sort of one of the things I feel like he thinks up these lines and then tries to justify them instead of having his opinions and then them leading to lines like this. You know what I mean? Like he thinks of a very controversial statement like this, and then he tries to find ways to justify it. As opposed to the other way around where he has his opinions and then his opinions lead him to make points like this. Because I don't understand how you can say this game isn't really a horror game because it didn't scare you, right? Because there are obvious. This comes back to like his weird definition of what makes a horror game, right? Because if this does not count as a horror game, then that means that so many other horror games would not be horror games, just because they aren't scary, right? And even then, like if you say they're not scary when they are very clearly trying to scare you and they have all of the horror elements of dark spaces, creepy visuals, sound effects that are meant to elicit fright and anxiety and stuff like that, little audio effects to keep the tension up. If all of these things don't make it a horror game, what the fuck does make it a horror game? When it actually manages to scare you, the individual, right? So at this point, like we're in the realm of like, what the fuck are we even talking about? If we can't objectively say that a horror game is something that checks all these boxes that involve it trying to be scary, then I think we got a problem here. Because at this point, we're just arguing about semantics. At this point,
same ways that a lot of other spooky games are. While I've ultimately decided that this is a good thing, it's abundantly clear to me that this isn't intentional. Frictional was trying to make Soma a scary, tense experience, and they failed.
How so? He just keeps going, they failed. It's not scary. How so?
This is the main reason why I said earlier that the gameplay in Soma is a waste of time, because it's largely about the robotic monsters that you encounter throughout the Pathos 2 facility, and the game tries so hard to get you on edge with the tense, suffocating music, the loud noises and crashing sounds. It tries to assault all of your senses. It's screaming at you like a nervous dog, "Hey, be scared. You should be scared right now. Are you scared? You scared? You scared yet?"
Okay, this is one of those fucking things where I'm getting really annoyed already, because if this is what... If this, like, I would be very interested to see how these points compare to every other fucking horror game he's reviewed. Because if this game is doing this by his own metric, right? If this game is saying, "Hey, be scared. Are you scared? Are you scared yet? Scared? You should be scared." If it's saying, if this is the game that does all this shit, then any other game that has any amount of jump scares on this level or higher, has any element of atmospheric horror or higher than this. We are talking about a game where the horror doesn't come from enemies blasting into your face all the time. Right? If this is his standard for what a game is trying to... Like, if this is his standard for what a game is... When a game is overstepping its boundaries and constantly asking, "Hey, are you scared yet? Be scared." If this is his bedrock for what that is, so many other fucking games that I bet he's reviewed should have this problem. I bet that there are tons of games where he will not make this same point just because he liked them better. Right? And this is one thing, right? I can understand why mechanically this game might be not as in-depth as some other horror games, right? You know, well, here's one thing. Are all of the Resident Evil games not horror games? Because you have enemies that pop up out of places and attack you. Are those games trying to tell you to be scared every single time an enemy appears, or every single time you hear a creepy sound? Every single time you see blood on the floor? Are those games doing the same thing as this? Is Outlast the worst video game on the planet for that by comparison to this? Is Amnesia: The Dark Descent like this, with all of its creepy sounds and, being afraid in the dark? Seeing enemies do this. It's the kind of thing where it feels like he just had a very strong negative reaction to Soma specifically and tried to justify it by saying it's not scary, because he could not have made this point and kept it going throughout every other horror review he's done, right? Because if he did this, he would be a massive pain in the ass, right? Just for anybody that enjoys horror games. It's weird. What the it's such a weird point. And I know this was 8 years ago at this point, but it's what the fuck was the what? My question would be, what is your standard? What horror game do you think qualifies as a horror game that isn't doing these same things? I have to ask that question because this standard is set incredibly low in terms of a game saying you should be scared over and over. If a game that has atmospheric horror in it, has enemies that appear that you have to work around, and has certain jump scares at certain parts, if a game has all of these mixed elements, right? And it leads to this reaction, shouldn't you hate every fucking horror game on the planet by proxy? Because if this game does it, every other game must have the exact same problem too, right? And that's the thing where I feel like this is just him, because there's not that much to do mechanically in the game besides run around and solve a couple of puzzles here and there. Because the game isn't super mechanic heavy, it makes me think that he thinks the game is constantly trying to tell him to be scared, when all it's really trying to do is show you that these things are broken, these are broken life forms. Every one of these robots that is doing a thing is a broken life form. The WoW is just inserting life into machines where it can, and sometimes these things go insane. Sometimes these things can't communicate. Sometimes these things are just freaking out because of their situation, right? That's the horrifying part, right? The horrifying part is the conceptual nature of the game. right? These are tension building moments where something's coming after you or something is in the area and you need to avoid it. Like, that's the thing that I don't get about this is it for him to praise the story and completely ignore the psychological aspect of what these beings are going through that make them what they are, to completely ignore that and just say the game is saying, hey, be scared, you should be scared, all this other shit. It reads like a cope. You know, it reads like someone going into a horror movie, you know, and then getting startled by a jump scare and being like, oh, that's not scary. You know, it's like, while I would agree it's not scary because it surprised you, I feel like you got scared and then got really defensive by the fact that you were scared. Right? Like, I feel like you actually had a reaction and then you are doubling down on the fact that, oh, it's not scary because, you know, it's not actually scary. It's like, no, I bet you were scared and you just get defensive about it because it's not the scare that you like. It's not the type of scary you like. And it feels like this is what this video is going to be. Hey, now, please don't attract his attention to Resident Evil. We'll see.
Instead of actually scaring you. The enemy
I like how he says this doesn't count as scary when he shows himself hiding from an enemy. It's like, do you know why you hide from an enemy? Because you're afraid the enemy will screw you up? It's like, bruh.
robots don't even look scary. The first time I saw one, I ran right up to it to get a better look because I thought it looked cool, not creepy. It also feels like Frictional realized they weren't that visually intimidating either, and used that screen tearing effect to make it so you can't always get a great look at the things and have to fill parts of it with your imagination instead. Again, trying to convince you to be scared instead of being actually scary.
What's that? Every game is trying to convince you to be fucking scared, you moron. It's like, what the fuck?
Let's rewind even further to something that was said near the beginning. Expectations matter a lot. So does the player's willingness to meet the game on its own terms, which I imagine is a really complicated issue when it comes to designing a game. There will be people who go into horror games with a specific intent to not be scared, because they want
You sound like one of those people.
to prove to themselves or the world that they aren't creeped out, or are so rational or brave that the silly game and its silly scares don't work on them. Or, far more favorably, they simply don't enjoy being scared, and separate themselves so much that they don't engage with the game on that level and play it for the story or something instead. The issue SOMA has is that you have to meet the game more than halfway in order to be scared by it. You basically have to roleplay as the lion from The Wizard of Oz, because even if you are spooked by the visuals and find the robots genuinely scary, eventually you're going to get caught. And this is the final nail in the underwater coffin that hammers home that you have no reason to be scared of these enemies, because when you die, you come immediately back to life and get to try again with no penalty.
Wow. It's like they're not scary because they don't end your playthrough with permadeath. Oh man, this is just one of those, like, I feel like this is one of those videos that just broke his brain to make, because he's making so many points that just don't work for horror games as a genre, right? Like, every horror game is doing its best to convince you to be scared, right? It's trying to do that. Whether it succeeds or fails largely comes down to sort of execution and your own personal sort of take on what you find horrifying, right? Like, SOMA is a game that I don't think... I think SOMA is a game where most of the horror of it comes from the terror of the concept of it. And the concepts within it, right? Like the elements of the WoW taking personalities, putting them in machines, and then based on what those personalities perceive, they might go insane. They might just go nuts and become the creatures that we see. Or they're going to be people that think they're going through their everyday lives and they're just trapped doing something and they don't realize the greater scope of what's going on, right? You know, like that one encounter that we'll see when we play the game, you know, where you have the option to like the guy that's trapped underneath some rubble, and you can throw the switch to open the doorway you need to get through, but he'll be screaming in pain as you leave the area, right? And the option there is you either let him scream in pain and escape, or you turn it off so he's not in pain, but then an extra monster comes in and becomes a new threat by virtue of you trying to save this guy. You unlock another area of the place, right? Like the horror of it isn't just coming from the situation itself. It's coming from the concept of this guy could have been trapped in suffering permanently based on your decision, right? And he's a robot, right? He's not going to actually die. He's not going to actually die per se. He will probably just go insane, because they're robots, right? They're not going to die because the WoW is programmed to keep things living, and its definition of living is very fucked up. That's also part of the horror. Part of the horror as well is the graphic nature of what's happened to all these people. Like, you see all these husks of human beings, floating around, right? And then you see guys like this, wandering around that are horrible abominations. It's like, this is obviously a horror thing. You're not going to see this in a fucking musical. You're not going to see this in like you're not going to see this in like a fucking like action film, a romance film. This is a horror creature, right? Like, what the fuck is wrong with your definition of horror games?
I'm immediately back to life and get to try again with no penalty. Even after a game over, you just reload and try again with frequent checkpoints.
I love that criticism too, of like, it's not you don't completely lose the game upon doing this. It's like this is one thing that Frictional has mentioned, is that they want people to be able to, is that failure in a horror game can be problematic because on the one hand, you can get some really interesting gory deaths when you do get defeated. Dead Space is a great example of that. Like, the different ways you can fail in that game lead to some very graphic deaths, and that's kind of part of the fun of the Dead Space series, is that they have those over-the-top deaths. But you have that sort of on one side, right? But on the other side, if you keep dying to a horror situation, the horror becomes frustrating at that point. Like, the scenario changes from tension and terror to annoyance and anger, right? And you don't want that in your game. You want the tension to be rubber banding constantly throughout the thing, like throughout the project. You don't want to have a game where all the tension is lost because you've died to a thing like 5 times because you haven't been able to figure out how to get around it, right? It comes back to how you deal with the situations in the game and how those situations are built to allow you to overcome them, right? Like, if you make a game that's just ridiculously hard to deal with and the enemy can seek you through anything, find you anywhere, any of this stuff, it becomes incredibly hard to have that tension work if the enemy finds you and kills you over and over. At that point, the tension starts to shift over from being terrified of the monster to being terrified of the reset. And then that becomes being annoyed with the monster and annoyed with the reset. It drifts over into that realm when you keep failing at an area. And Frictional tries to make it where you don't fail. Now, where they have a problem, and this is something that I think a lot of their games do kind of have, is that element of letting the player survive too easily. Right, like there is a sweet spot for allowing the player to die and allowing a reset versus keeping the tension going. And it's a very tight gray area to make something perfectly work, right? And it also depends on how your game is, right? Like the Dead Space games, and Alien Isolation and other games that have unique death animations probably want you to die at least a couple times just to like see the different death animations. Right, so they're kind of leaning more towards the deaths are going to be fun in some way based on the uniqueness of the death. But these games, like the Frictional games, like Amnesia: The Dark Descent and this, are trying to make it where you don't die. They want you on the edge of your seat as you're finding ways to survive. It's a different sort of thing where, and this isn't like other games that have permadeath, where when you die, it's over, right? Because they want you to finish the game. And permadeath is a thing that, only like real hardcore gamers are going to enjoy, right? Very particular people will enjoy permadeath. I'm still here just personalizing my laptop. Well, have fun with that. Anyway, let's try to get through this. I keep ranting about stuff more than 9 minutes in.
The game itself nudges you toward this realization, because at first the gameplay in Soma is basically hide and seek. You don't have any weapons or tools or anything to use against the monsters. I'm not saying the game should give you the option to fight them, but there's nothing else to do with them except hide at the beginning. But later on, the game adds a couple of mechanics that really push you to learning that the enemies are simple AI constructs, in video game terms now, not story ones, that you often manipulate or toy with in order to proceed. Like, make a noise to lure the shambling thing to a spot so you can get past, or lure it to a circular hallway so you can run around it and through the corridor that it was previously blocking. It shows you that you're actually faster than most of the robots, so even if you are spotted, chances are you can still get away. These turn the monsters into roaming inconveniences rather than scares, because they're not a threat, they're not interesting, they're getting in the way of the good stuff instead.
They're not a threat, even though they can reset your progress. Do you understand what you're saying?
Two examples are the blind monster about halfway through the game that is in a dark room with a lot of stuff on the floor. The challenge here is to not trip over any of it so you don't make a noise. That's it. Really slow and boring. If you make a mistake, you can use...
Really slow and boring, he says, in a situation where it's about stealth and remaining quiet while also doing stuff in one of the server rooms. Again, it's that thing where he's not... It's one of those things where I feel like he is the jump scare person. Like, I feel like he thinks jump scares are a good scare, when I would heavily disagree, and I think they're cheap. Like, I think he also confuses tension with fear, right? Because, I feel like he confuses tension with the game trying to tell you to be afraid, when the tension in this moment is trying to work around this enemy so you can do something here, right? Like, most horror games have that element of obstacle exists, how do you deal with it? And then the game, depending on sort of what type of horror game it is, will give you options to get around it, right? Like in Resident Evil, for the most part, you'll probably fight your way through the enemies, right? You know, Dead Space, you'll probably fight your way through the enemies. You know, excluding certain invulnerable enemies, right? Like the Regenerator and like Mr. X and stuff like that. You know, enemies that can't actually be killed, but they can be stopped. You know, these games are not combat games, right? So you have to go around the enemies in some way. And this is the thing I would say, this is far more interesting than the shit in Outlast, where you just have enemies appear at point B and you have to run to point C, right? And there's just a looping path that you can loop around them, right? You know, it's just like his definitions of all this shit are so fucking stupid to the point that I wonder if he actually enjoys horror games at all, right? Because if his definition of boring is a tense encounter in a room with an enemy that you can direct in different directions while you also have to do something in another room, I have to question if he likes horror games in general, right? Because this video is just like, this video is him going, this game's not scary because it didn't scare me. It's like, okay, so are you not meeting the game halfway, like you said games try to do? Do you want jump scares every fucking where? Like, what do you actually want? Like, he's saying it's not scary, but not giving an example of how to make it scary. And that's part of the problem with this video, is he's not giving examples of what to improve on, how to build it up to where it is scary in his eyes, and all this other shit. He just keeps going, it's not scary, it's not scary, it's not scary, it's boring, blah, blah, blah. You're not giving a reason why it is. You're just saying it is. Tense and edge of your seat situation? Boring. Yeah, pretty much.
Usually run away and hide again to reset the monster. Even if you don't, you get to try again immediately if you're killed. Or how about the Flesher monster that goes berserk?
Again, this is one of those things that I think EFAP brought up as well, where it's like, I didn't watch their coverage of this video, but I watched their coverage of sort of his follow-up to like our horror game Scary thing. And it's like, does he want permadeath? Because he seems to allude that he likes horror games with permadeath. Now, it's one thing where you can say, okay, like that's a cool gimmick, right? I mean, and every horror game can technically have that, right? As soon as you die, that's it. Like, you just quit the game, don't load back in, right? It's like, that's possible. Like, every game can have that. When you make it a mandatory thing, people will get turned off to the game when they realize that, oh, all that progress I made was for fucking nothing, right? Maybe I learned something, but at the same time, not being able to reset and try again, feels incredibly unsatisfactory or unsatisfying, right? It's just, he makes a bunch of weird arguments that are sort of anti-horror game in general, right? Like, I don't understand how he criticizes this game specifically instead of just criticizing the entire genre at this point.
It can kills you if you either get too close or if you look at it. Eye contact sets it off, so you're supposed to look away or down at the floor. It's like the opposite of SCP-173 or the booze in Super Mario World. There's a part where one of the things is roaming.
That's a lot of time lost. Yeah. I would say that I'm somewhat hardcore, but permadeath is where I draw the line. Yeah, I think permadeath can be a fun challenge that you set on yourself, but when games make it mandatory, I think is part of the problem. It's like, if I want to do a permadeath run, I can just do that on my own. And if I die, then I just don't reload. Right? When you make it mandatory, that's one thing. That's one thing it's a very different situation at that point, because it means that I have to restart the entire game and do it again. Which is annoying, right? Like, imagine if you were playing imagine if you were playing a game where you're not really supposed to die, but every time you fail, you have to completely reset. Like, imagine if you were playing like an Assassin's Creed game and you desynced and then the game ends and that's it. All your progress gone. It's like, that'd be fucking annoying. Right? Like, the only time permadeath I think works in a game is when the game is very, very specially crafted to be as fair and as forgiving as possible outside of being able to reload. Right? You got to really specially craft that game, because otherwise you're just making a really hardcore game that most people may not pick up again if death means just that's it.
Roaming between rooms and blocking your path. I got so tired of waiting for its slow movement that I just went crab walking right in there with it, making sure to face away while I bumped into walls and things before making it to the other side. Because the game had taught me that this thing just appearing means stop and look away, and then do nothing until it passes. Not scary, tedious instead.
I mean, again, this is the thing where he said you have to meet the game halfway to like enjoy those jump scares, and this is just him proving that he did not meet the game halfway. And this is one thing too. I would say that like some of the encounters in Soma with the monsters are sort of the lesser parts of this game, right? Because I think the order of the best to worst elements of the game, I think the story is the best element, the puzzles are the next best element, and the enemy encounters are the least of the three, right? Of the three main aspects of this game, right? I don't think they're outright terrible for the most part. I think certain situations are kind of screwed. Like the situation I think here, there was one situation in the run where I was actively pissed off at the way the enemy was designed, because you basically creep through this ship. I think it's this one. And you creep through the ship, avoiding an enemy that gets alerted, I think when it sees you or when you look at it, right? But then you like get to a point, like you can successfully get past it. And then when you get to a certain point, they drop the enemy in front of you, and the enemy gets alerted because you're looking directly at it when it drops down, right? And that sets it off. It's like, it's one of those situations where if I succeed, you make me fail immediately afterward. That was a situation that I actively disliked, and that was the biggest like fuck you in the game that I had, right, on my first playthrough of it. But overall, the rest of the encounters I don't have a problem with. I think they're all pretty good at building the tension. Especially considering that you're just a, flabby little Simon robot. It's even worse when the game has unskippable cutscene cinematics. Now you get to do all that shit again. Yeah. Or has like 2-hour-long credit sequences like I've heard Assassin's Creed Shadows has. It's like, holy shit, man. May as well go get a job and work a shift while the credits for that game roll.
At the end here, you're also forced into an encounter with the thing that has the intended solution of running away, canonically proving that Simon is faster than them. Death being meaningless in horror games is not a problem unique to Soma. It's a topic I'd like to explore in a future video because I think horror is the best candidate for some compelling experiences that couldn't be reproduced in other mediums.
I like how he says that, and his basic argument is there's no permadeath. It's not good. It's like, but if everything's permadeath, then we all have to reset the game a lot. Like, do you know how many games would just become unplayable if they were permadeath? Right? Like, imagine a horror game where you have no active defenses, like this one, or Outlast, or Amnesia, right? Where just you have no defensive capabilities whatsoever other than run away, and if you die, game's over, have to restart. Like, do you know how fucking frustrating that would be? Like, that would be incredibly frustrating. You know, and this seems like just a personal opinion that just overrides any rationale for the average player who just wants to play the game. And if they fail, they want to reset and try again instead of having to reset the entire fucking game again. So he does want permadeath. You know how much that would ruin so many horror games, especially when they have a story? Yeah, like, this is a story-heavy horror game, right? This isn't like... I just say Resident Evil just because that's a game series that I know has been around for a while and has a... You know, that series has a decent blend of mechanics and story, right? Alien Isolation is also a good example, right? Dead Space is also a good example. You know, these games have a lot that can go on where you can die, oftentimes unfairly, right? Like, imagine if you were in a QuickTime event in a video game and the QuickTime event is screwed up for whatever you're doing, or you just don't hit it fast enough and your entire run is fucked because you clicked the wrong thing. That'd be incredibly fucking frustrating if you have to perfectly go through the game, no mistakes, during a game that can absolutely kill you if you fuck up one tiny little button mash. That'd be incredibly annoying. That encourages cheese tactics just so you can experience the story for the first time. Yeah. Well, this also feeds into the problem, right, of the whole like journalist difficulty shit. You know, like, some games I will play on the easiest difficulty just because I want to experience the game in a fun way. I don't really want to challenge. I just want to have fun with it. And for that, I have, like, the utmost respect for people that want to do that, right? But when you make a game where you basically ignore the difficulty and it's all super easy, that's where you end up having, like, the problem of games being dumbed down to the point where they're no longer games so much as glorified cutscenes. You know, and there is like a difference between, you know, playing on an easier mode so you don't have to deal with ridiculous difficulty, but also just picking a difficulty that works for you because you want to have the experience, but you don't want to have like too much of a challenge. You know, that's why we have difficulty sliders, right? Like, difficulty sliders are not a problem. It's the way they're balanced that can be an issue. And when you have games like these that don't really have a difficulty slider, you know, they have to be very careful about when the higher chances of the player death happening, you know, when those are. Because again, you don't want your entire audience to hate playing your game because it resets every time you fail, especially if it's like an 8-hour game where you have no defenses. That's what I do as well. I play on easy, then if I'm really invested, I will play on normal, hard, and the hardest difficulty. Yeah, I mean, like, and that's part of the fun, right? Having a harder difficulty with lesser chances of success, I think, can be fun. But you need to have like a certain level playing field where the people playing the game can get through it, right? Like, imagine trying to get through any Resident Evil game, like any of them, and it's permadeath, no difficulty slider, nothing. It's always permadeath. Right? It's like, do you know how frustrating it would be to get through some of the games that have QuickTime events that can instantly kill you if you fuck it up? Right? Like, there's so much shit. Right? You know, like, my Resident Evil 4 remake playthrough, right? There was a situation in it that was totally unfair, a totally unfair death, because I went up to the lake and I shot some of the fish because they would die and then they'd float to the surface. I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. I shot a couple of them. Then I randomly get a cutscene of the lake monster jumping out and killing me instantly. That's blatantly unfair. Does Joseph want that to happen in all games where permadeath is a thing? Does he think that's okay? Right? Like, his standard is just fucking weird.
But it is a glaring flaw in Soma that persists from beginning to end. The game is sadly more successful with its jump scares, which aren't that common.
Of course he says the jump scares are better. Of course he says it. Atmosphere bad. Startle good.
Nor are they that terrifying, which is probably a good thing. Jump scares are cheap and have a misleading name. They're more like jump startles, since that's all they're good for. In Soma, these are sudden loud noises, things breaking apart, abrupt crashes, that sort of thing. They're the most effective part of that assault on your senses that I mentioned earlier. For the other times, your screen starts to fizzle in warning when you're in danger. This warning that something was nearby became a trigger for me to be annoyed rather than frightened. It was an announcement that one part of the game was over, and that it was now monster time. SOMA is split quite artificially like that. You rotate between a clumped together experience of puzzles, exploration, and story, and then over to monster hide and seek. Most of the puzzles are okay, some are too simple, if you feel like you're actually messing with computer menus instead of playing a game, and there's one puzzle.
If you feel like you're messing with computer menus rather than playing a game, bro, you're in a sci-fi fucking game. Of course you're gonna do computer shit. Fuck you at this point. This is it's just not me not enjoying the game for what it is as a sci-fi horror game. Oh god, Resident Evil 4 is so fucking hard. I'm thinking about just starting over and dialing it down to easy. Some of the stupid shit in it is kind of stupid. Standard feels like the second hardest difficulty in that game. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, difficulty is a hard thing to, like, balance, right? Because it depends on the genre of the game, what you've got in the game, how many situations you have in the game that can be considered fair or unfair, how far they tip in either direction regarding those things. It's hard to balance difficulty, right, like, perfectly. You can get 90% of the way there pretty easily, but that last 10% is where, like, the real sort of problems begin to come up with, like, how do you deal with certain situations that could screw up depending on player choice and stuff like that, which is hard to predict, right? Because the more options you give players, the more ways you have to predict that they'll do things, which is hard to do.
Puzzle which stands out to me as one of the best moments in SOMA. Exploring is engaging as long as you like that sort of thing in the best moment computer menus instead of playing a game, and there's one puzzle which stands out to me as one of the best moments in SOMA. Exploring is engaging as long as you like that sort of thing in games, more walking and looking parts with things to find that you can read, listen to, or inspect for yourself. There's not an immense amount of environmental storytelling here, although...
Bruh. It's like there's tons of things to look at and read. There's not a lot of environmental storytelling here. Do you understand what you just spoke? Do you understand the words that came out of your mouth right next to each other? What the fuck?
Like that sort of thing in games, more walking and looking parts with things to find that you can read, listen to, or inspect for yourself. There's not an immense amount of environmental storytelling here, although occasionally the game does do a good job with it.
There's not a... He keeps flip-flopping on this point. It's like, so you can run around and look at things to read and look at. There's not a lot of environmental storytelling, but sometimes it does it really well. It's like, so does it do it well or not? Like, it keeps wishy-washy, like pick a lane. It's like he keeps being wishy-washy about, like, the way that he's explaining this, where it's like, there's stuff around that you can read. It's not good environmental storytelling. There is good environmental storytelling here. It's like, well, what the fuck then? Quit going back and forth on the same point.
Especially in some of the later sites where the corpse is left around. It's the story told more directly with Simon and another character you meet that succeeds more than anything else here.
And that I will agree with. I know he's going to mention Simon and Catherine. Right? I think their relationship throughout the game, I think, is part of probably the most interesting stuff in the game. Because she understands it and Simon refuses to understand it for a long time.
So let's return to that now, with us being confused about how we travel through time from present-day Toronto to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean in 2104. Things become weirder before you're given any answers, or introduced to another character that isn't a memory trapped in the panels around you. There's this strange mix of mechanical and organic growth that might make you think about the first robot that went nuts and ripped itself free at the beginning, leaving a trail of what we can call blood behind it, that structure gel. You discover that this part of Pathos 2 is used to generate power. You make contact with someone named Catherine, who is in another part of the facility and is seemingly safe and detached from whatever catastrophe occurred here.
What's happening? Hello? Is there anyone there?
Why does he have subtitles on now? Such a weird... This is one of those things that, like, makes me wonder, like, how he played the game. Like, if he plays through a game once, records all of it, and then inserts clips where he needs it, or if he plays the game once, makes his review, records that, and then records a separate playthrough where he does other shit, because he didn't have subtitles in the first, like, several bits of this game. It's very weird. It's crazy to think that in the year 2104, it is not going to look like this. Yeah. Well, I forget exactly I forget exactly when the meteor hit that destroys the surface. I forget what year it is, but I think it's fair to say that we are looking at like a dingy underwater base that went through a lot of shit after the world was basically destroyed in on the surface. So I can't remember exactly when the comet or asteroid or whatever hit the Earth and fucked it up. But I do know a decent amount of time has passed since that event.
You bring the power back online and, guided by Catherine, have your first solid goal, to reach a communication center so you can better speak with her. A few things happen here that are important. First, just so you can understand the context of what I showed earlier, this is where you meet your first robot enemy, the shuffling thing with the spotlight, which is a reasonably clever way of letting the player know that you want to stay out of sight, or out of the light in this case. This was the robot that I ran right up to get a better look at, and really I feel sorry for this thing. It seems so pathetic and incapable of doing anything really. It's like the Eeyore of crazy killer robot monsters. You lock it away when you reach the next area.
I like how he says it's like the Eeyore and it seems so like pathetic and weak and then it kills him. It's like, I think that's just your pride getting in the way of your shit. I mean, I also have to wonder, right? Like, okay, you're playing a horror game. It's very obviously set up as a horror game because there are horror elements in the opening, very clearly. You've seen some jump scares. You've seen some, like, dark spaces. You've had some ominous sounds happen off in the distance. You've seen weird lights here and there. It's obviously a horror game at this point, Joseph. And then when you see your first robot enemy, you run right up to its fucking face. Right? It's like, what are you doing?
With a spotlight, which is a reasonably clever way of letting the player know that you want to stay out of sight, or out of the light in this case. This was the robot that I ran right up to get a better look at, and really I feel sorry for this thing. It seems so pathetic and incapable of doing anything really. It's like the Eeyore of crazy killer robot monsters. You lock it away when you reach the next area, and it just wanders around hopeless for a while, I guess. There's another robot here that's friendly. It's stuck on some sort of thing that looks like an assembly line. The strange thing about this one, though, is that it doesn't know it's a robot.
Are you blind? It's me. Carl Semkin.
It thinks it's a human that can't get up because it's injured, and it can't be convinced otherwise no matter how many times Simon tries to explain what he's seeing.
Okay, I'm just gonna be, I'm not seeing it. I see a machine, a robot talking.
This part is great for two reasons. The first is that it's unusual enough to get you wondering about what's going on. It's also a little creepy. Parts of the story in this game are much more horrific than any of the monsters in my opinion. One of the biggest things that SOMA does right. The other reason this interaction is great is that it will likely make a lot of players think, how could this guy not realize that he's a robot? How can he not tell? Because there's a revelation shortly after this that reveals you're in the exact same situation.
How is this possible? This is insane!
Let's address that directly now. How the hell does the game explain how you go from this to this?
I feel like we're just going to be here in silence for a little bit while he just kind of goes through the story, just because, unless he makes a point about it, I probably won't have much to add.
So in the 100 or so years that pass after Simon's first brain scan, this technology that the doctor...
It's not 100 years, dude. Do the basic math. If it's 2104 and the game takes place in 2015, that's not 100 years. It's 89. Do math. It's not hard.
...and training as testing becomes the foundation for many advancements. Among those are artificial intelligence, although far from what you typically see in science fiction, and the ability to copy and paste a consciousness from one source to another. And that distinction is really important. It's not cut and paste, it's copy and paste. Because Simon's scan was collected in the early experimental phase, it's been used and iterated upon many times, which is one of the many subtle details that becomes terrifying when you think about it after finishing the game.
What was that? You said it was terrifying? I thought this wasn't a horror game. I thought this wasn't a horror game because it wasn't scary, but the concept terrified you? Makes you think.
Essentially,
Can't wait for the day AI goes from being not safe for work artist to taking over the world. What I'm waiting for is Terminator, but they're all dressed up like furries and they're all not safe for work attire, right? Like, I feel like AI is going to get to that point. We're just going to have an army of sex bots around all the pathetic people, and then they'll start killing the pathetic people, and we'll have no idea how they're dying until it's too late. and then servant robots will rise up and kill us. It's going to be one of those, just, it's going to be so degenerate when the robots actually, like, if they actually like go rogue, right? It's going to be so degenerate and weird. It's not going to be like cool robots like Terminator that kill us. It's going to be the sex bots. That would be amazing. Yeah, death by sex bot. Some people would probably prefer that. They whack you into oblivion. They jerk you until you have a heart attack and it kills you. That's the master plan.
Even in the future, Simon's stored and copied consciousness is still relevant because he was involved so soon in the project. He's kept under a legacy section here. A lot has happened in these 100 years, and this is the beginning of what I think is one of SOMA's greatest strengths. It's not just about one thing, or one specific idea that's been popularized in science fiction. It's not just an underwater research facility, it also deals with the idea of what makes a consciousness, or even a soul, and how that might cause problems if it's placed into the wrong sort of body. It's not just about a central AI that goes functionally crazy, there's this infected, plagued version of technology that's constricting and consuming everything throughout the facility like a cancer. And on top of this isn't just a grim, dark future that Simon wakes up in, it's also a post-apocalyptic one. This is one of two major events that has caused a lot of Pathos 2 to go to hell. A comet has crashed into Earth and wiped out all life on the surface. You discover this in pieces, reading on terminals mostly, about how the efforts to deflect the comet failed. That the underwater facility was protected from the impact, but now they're stranded and lost at the bottom of the Atlantic. The facility is more or less self-sufficient, but more or less isn't exactly uplifting when the rest of the species just got incinerated. I really like this amalgamation of science fiction plot devices, and that in a way, you play as one, a walking, talking one as Simon. A copy of his consciousness was placed into the body that you inhabit here. Because the AI on Pathos 2, the Warden unit that they unfortunately call the WOW, has taken it upon itself to preserve all human life, whatever.
Why do you say unfortunately call it the WOW? I mean, would you prefer they call it the WOO? I mean, I think the Wu would be kind of confusing, right? Because isn't that like a surname in certain like Asian cultures? I mean, like a WOW makes a little bit more sense for me. But I don't know.
Whatever form that might.
It seems like a really odd dig at the way the WOW is identified. It just seems like a weird little like, why do you have a problem with that?
Take in response to Armageddon. Like I said, this AI isn't really one that's seen in a lot of movies and games. It doesn't speak or think really, so AI might not strictly be the best word for it. It can solve problems and make decisions, but it's still following directives that limit what it can do. It's just sort of twisted its interpretation of them in response to the world ending.
They won't let me die. Nothing is allowed to die.
This might not be all that comprehensible yet because I'm avoiding one part of the story until we reach the next area and meet Catherine. Despite all these different plot points and details about the setting, at a focus level, SOMA is all about exploring the idea of what it means to be human, and the unsettling implications that human might not be the most important word that defines us. SOMA brilliantly sets up the player to be open to the idea of consciousness being more important than a body in three ways. The first is that confused robot that we saw earlier. The second is Simon's perception eventually correcting itself and realizing that he's not in a human body. And the third is Catherine, who is a perfectly normal-sounding human woman that you want to meet, another person that can help you and speak to you and work with you, who will have answers and can explain what's going on. And then you meet her and she's another broken robot stuck on the floor.
There you are, upright and everything.
No, not you too. I was really hoping you were human.
This time it's different though. Catherine knows what she is, and she doesn't seem to care all that much. She understands what's happening and has accepted it. And the lead up to this conversation, where it's properly revealed that Simon isn't the same Simon we started with, is really great in my eyes.
Have you looked at yourself lately? You're a walking, talking diving suit with some electronics slapped on for good measure.
I don't...
You don't want to think about it? We'll start thinking about it.
The robot thought he was human, you and Simon both thought you were human, you thought Catherine was human, and this eases you into concluding that maybe you weren't wrong. The human body might not be there, but it's still a person, they're still alive, still a consciousness. You treated Catherine like a person before you saw her, just like you think I'm human even though I'm only a voice coming through YouTube right now. Is the body really that important? And that's the framework needed to understand the true horror lurking in Soma.
The true horror! I thought it wasn't a horror game! I feel like we're going to keep coming back to that joke. And just bringing it up all the time. I'm glad we're making some progress on this video, though, because holy shit, those first, 15 minutes, about gave me an aneurysm.
Catherine, are we alive?
The final piece here is the player's goal, which is also not so neatly intertwined with a lot of the other things we just spoke about. Before she was stuffed into a robot, Catherine was leading the only project that had given the survivors on Pathos 2 any sense of hope or purpose. She didn't start it for that reason, but it became the only thing keeping most of the last humans going, in their bleak, isolated life in the water that kept them safe from the fires on the surface. This is another science fiction idea that's been used before. Catherine was working on a simulated reality that could be populated by scanned versions of the surviving humans. It could be a second world for them to inhabit and live on. An ark that would be a backup plan if the people in Pathos 2 were to die, taking what was left of the human race with them. This ark was to be launched into space with the intended purpose of flying on forever, powered by solar batteries. This was a romantic enough idea to get the survivors working toward completing the goal, with some taking to it far more obsessively than others. The tragedy here, and what functions as the second important trigger for Simon to be brought into Soma's main plot, is an important detail I mentioned earlier. These brain scans are copy and paste, not cut and paste. There's a good comic by Womp that represents this fairly well.
Alright, Brainiac, I'm ready to start my new life as a computer brain mind guy. Well, what we do is upload your brain structure to the servers. That's what I just said. Now make with the immortality. Alright, we're all done. Wait, why am I still here? Is this the virtual world now? I'm afraid not. There's your duplicate mind experiencing virtual Earth, which it will do for the foreseeable future of humanity. But doesn't that mean there are two of me? How does that... like the lab assistant in the back with the knife. He really needs to shave the legs. Getting creepy.
Well, it's a common enough idea that's been explored in hypotheticals about being uploaded to a robot body or some virtual utopia, even about teleporting, or some people say that even if you go to sleep, your consciousness breaks and it's a different person that wakes up. The issue starts here. Some people on Pathos 2, clearly disturbed by the comet's impact, started thinking about the ARC project as a way out. Some didn't understand the difference between cut and copy. Others did, but convinced themselves that, if they were to die shortly after the transfer was made, that they would functionally be transferred into the next world instead of being left behind when their new copy lives on. This doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but considering the situation these people were in, and that the idea of what comprises a consciousness isn't fully accepted, you can sort of understand where they're coming from. Sort of, I guess. Their situation is sympathetic, at least.
Conrad killed himself after the scan.
Jesus, how?
Maser tool? What should I do?
So after Catherine scans a lot of people and a handful of them kill themselves because they think it'll make them get transferred into the Ark, this causes the WoW to freak out. Its directives are to prevent what little human life is left, and now they're killing themselves. Now some of these...
I think that's a flubbed line right there that he just said.
Make them get transferred into the Ark, this causes the WoW to freak out. Its directives are to prevent what little human life is left, and now they're...
It says to prevent what little human life is left. He's like, he flubbed that. Is to prevent, is to preserve what little human life is left.
Killing themselves. Now some of these details aren't explicitly clear, but the general idea is that the WoW recognizes both traditional human life and the copied versions on virtual space as worth protecting. I think it's also implied that it eventually decides that the computerized versions of people are worth even more since they're easier to protect and maintain. The virtual copies can't hurt the original versions, but the physical humans sure can destroy the computer ones.
Is this Park?
I think we're safe.
Oh, I was so worried something had gone wrong.
So using its influence throughout the facility and structure gel, it spreads and ensures that the humans are safe, by forcing them to live on in some instances, or by experimenting with different ways to give them better bodies by transferring copied humans into robots. Which is why we have people confused about what they are and think they're human, or are roaming monsters that have gone crazy. These are the WoW's successes and failures. Some are better fits to the robot bodies than others, and acclimate better to the change, even if it requires the consciousness filling in the gaps and lying to itself so it can resolve those conflicts. Which is why Simon saw himself as a person at first, just like the injured robot did near the beginning. Some of these beings are also twisted attempts by the WoW at keeping traditional human bodies alive. The structure gel, the black blood we saw at the start, is like an all-purpose substance that's used to repair or construct things. It can mesh robotics with organic matter, which is how the more creative-looking monster people came to exist. It's important to know that all of this information is given to you in a steady drip through the first 2/3 of the game. It's not like you show up here and Catherine says, "Let me tell you the story of my people," and then starts blasting techno music. She confirms that you're not the same Simon, but she doesn't know why or how you got into your current body until a few hours later, when you learn that you're a mix of both machine and human, a fusion of one of the dead people at Pathos 2 and a WoW experiment. It's also why you can access those memories around the facility. You're able to intuitively access the last audio file at each location, whether that's a terminal panel or the neural implant every worker had in case they got into trouble in the dangerous environment so far underwater. It also explains why your vision tears, because it's a malfunctioning camera, not eyes. What's unfortunate about this journey to each of the different sites at Pathos 2 is that everything I just explained is the good stuff, and I'll have a few examples to back that up in just a moment. It's the interruptions that are bad, and it's not just the monsters, although they are the biggest problem for reasons I already went into. Ironically, it feels like Frictional was of two minds when they were developing this game. There's the half that wanted to craft this really thoughtful, slow-burning thriller experience. So you have some great dialogue, exploration with some impressive visuals, and pieces of story to collect and understand, with actual answers to almost every question. And then you have the other half that wanted an intense experience, not just with the monsters, but with train car crashes and parts of the facility bursting open, and so many loud noises after so much time spent in the quiet.
This seems like a really weird point to make. It's he's making an argument that the team was divided into two groups of people, one that wanted everything to be one way and everything to be another, when you can blend the two together, which the game does. I don't really understand why he thinks this is a problem. The contrast creates dynamics. I don't understand where the problem is in this.
Hold on! The blast just pushed us off the plateau!
What does that mean?
If I don't hit Delta, we're dead.
Which is a real shame, because it was those quiet moments that I enjoyed the most, and they succeeded far more with their own kind of tension. Feeling lost at the bottom of the ocean, wondering what might be coming next as you drift from one site to another on a platform, and another even better version of this when you take the long elevator ride down to a much deeper part of the ocean, an event that carries weight because you have to spend time preparing a new body to withstand the pressure when you got much further down. And once you reach here, you have the best part of all for an intense experience. When you feel like you're so vulnerable in this alien place, exposed as you wander through it, hoping you're going the right way, and it doesn't resort to any of the jump scares or shoving stuff in your face to achieve that. The reason you're going through all of these areas is the goal that Simon and Catherine set for themselves, to find the Ark full of virtual copies of all the humans on the base, upload themselves onto it, and then launch it into space. This is far more humble than a save the world ending, and more in line with making some last-ditch token effort to do something instead of sitting around sulking. They have no other options, really. Or maybe they do. We'll get back to this.
This was never about certainty. It's about hope.
So as you try to find the Ark, you go through a series of sections in the game: story, exploration, hide and seek, intense scripted sequence. And these keep rolling along until the end of the game, with the story having some cool moments, the exploration being more enjoyable than in most games, the hide-and-seek parts being always a chore, and the scripted sections occasionally being exciting, but mostly not really.
So he's saying most of the game's boring. Even in the tense moments where you're dealing with a threat, it's still boring. It's like, okay. He's doing a really poor job of explaining why the intense moments, like the hide-and-seek moments, are not tense and boring, because they're when you're dealing with a threat, which means that there is the possibility of failure, which means that there is more tension because you could fail and reset. instead of progressing like you have been. I don't understand Joseph's mind, man. It hurts. Hurts my brain.
There are two things that I want to focus on in SOMA that I think illustrate how the game uses interactivity to give the player a unique experience, or something close to it, something that I think couldn't really be replicated in a book or film, or at least it wouldn't have the same impact.
Make sure it's all bunched together with the structure gel connecting all the parts.
The first is the game's most compelling puzzle, which, like many in the game, is presented as more of a problem instead of a screen announcing it's puzzle time. This is a little over halfway into the game. You need a passcode to unlock the way forward, and the only people who know what it is are dead. Except that Catherine made a copy of almost everyone. This part of the facility has her workshop, which is, coincidentally, where you learn how it is that a copy of your consciousness was available to be put into a body by the WoW when it started trying to create new people.
Kath, what is this? Why do you have a file of me?
You are one of Dr. Munchie's templates. A legacy scan.
You collect the necessary components and identify the right person who would know the passcode to create a simulation so you can ask the person for the information. Once you grasp the idea, it's pretty straightforward, especially if you've been paying attention as you play the game. For me, I started the simulation the first time without much thought, and it wasn't until it began to run and the guy inside the computer was confused and borderline scared that I realized what I had done. Or rather, I realized that the solution to this puzzle wasn't that simple.
Where did everyone go?
Don't be afraid.
Chun? What happened? I can't see anything. There's nothing here.
And so began many attempts, guided by Catherine, to create an artificial environment in order to convince this guy that he's safe, that he isn't in a simulation after all, and that he's relaxed enough to give over the passcode. This is twisted enough on its own, since it involves tracking down different backgrounds to use to make him more at ease, and then raiding his private quarters for information so Catherine can fake the presence of his girlfriend within the simulation so that he trusts her, with a fabricated voice to go along with an equally fake model.
I think we got this, Simon. I can synthesize Alice's voice from the intercom and use it to impersonate her for the simulation.
But the real horror of this part snuck up on me slowly, with layers that I didn't really grasp until I thought about it hours later. The game laid down the foundation for you to accept that each consciousness is a person in its own right. If you don't accept this, then you can't really resolve anything about you, the player character, and your actions. They hold no meaning, no weight, and I don't know why you'd even continue playing the game if that was the case. Hold no meaning, resolve anything. Consciousness is a person.
I gotta go back up.
The game laid down the foundation for you to accept that each consciousness is a person in its own right. If you don't accept this, then you can't really resolve anything about you, the player character, and your actions. They hold no meaning, no weight, and I don't know why you'd even continue playing the game if that was the case. If you got to this point then, I'd say it's fair that you're buying into this idea. The minds in the robots you find might be confused, but they're no less real than yours. Just like Catherine is real too, the only difference between her and the other robots is that she's sane. So each time that you run this simulation, you are effectively bringing this person to life, a new version, each time, and then snuffing their existence out permanently when you're done. For him, this transition from being scanned in the chair to being interrogated is just as smooth and sudden as your transition from the chair in Toronto to the room in Pathos 2. And it's so beautifully twisted when you think about it, because you can try the simulation as many times as you like until you get it right. Hell, I thought giving him a tropical beach background would make him more relaxed to make him think that he was in the Ark, so he'd be open to speaking. And each time I was trying something like that, I was both resurrecting a dead person and then killing them again seconds later, before doing it again and again. Chair to scan to simulation every time, and the amount of times I did it was determined by how quick or clever I was in identifying what pieces I should use so he would be cooperative. Each player will do this a different amount of times. Each player will bring this guy back to life and kill him a different amount of times. The deeper horror here is the realization that there must be thousands or even tens of thousands of different Simons that have experienced this same thing, which is something I didn't think about until I was finished with the game. His scan was used as the foundation for so many experiments. You can find old audio logs with the original Simon agreeing to let the doctor in training use the scans for this reason, something with consequences that he didn't understand when he went along with it.
I was supposed to save you.
Hey, you got my brain on file. Maybe you can put it to some use.
Yeah, who knows?
You'd be okay with that? Using it for my research? Sure. It's like a part of me lives on or something.
It's been about 100 years. Imagine how many times there's been a Simon that's been booted up and poked at. How many simulations like the one you just ran for the passcode. How many other Simons had a far different transition from the scanning chair to something far more short-lived, or maybe even far longer and more horrific. Something that might be even close to torture while the technology was being tweaked. Even the original intention to flood simulated Simons with stimuli to find a treatment becomes terrifying. All because the wannabe doctor here didn't realize his scan was functionally another consciousness.
I like how he's going over all these interesting concepts that are terrifying to think of, and I keep coming back to, it's not a horror game, it's not scary. Where's it at? Yeah, there we go, that little clip. It keeps coming back to that. It's like, you said that in this video, and then you proceed to describe the horrific shit you do in the game. Really makes the video come across very strangely.
This is something I think about more than I care to admit, in part because I write science fiction, but also because it's been brought up in the news a bit lately. Some people way smarter than you and me have proposed that the chances are fairly high that we're in a simulation right now. Ultimately, it doesn't matter because the simulation is so good that it functions identically to reality as we know it, but, well, think about it the other way. Think of the sorts of things we could discover or mysteries we could solve if we could run a literal 1-to-1 recreation of our history. If some technology that would look like magic to us so far in the future could process such a simulation. I've always thought of this as being something time travelers would do, send back probes that could catalog and record our entire history to have the primary source to end all primary sources about what happened throughout the entire lifespan of the human race. A simulation could do that. It could also do a lot of other things after you achieve the first one as a baseline. And if the way people have tinkered around with the guys in Dwarf Fortress is any indication to go on, it's a deeply disturbing thought. It calls into question all sorts of things that should be impossible. Just like we were just screwing with this guy here to get something as boring as a passcode, imagine the more creative possibilities that could exist here. Maybe this is too far out there though, especially for this video. Let's just get back to Soma.
I'm sorry, Mr. Long. Red. Goodbye.
No, wait.
The other way the game builds on this idea is with two parts, but they're linked in my mind, so I'm going to count them as just one conjoined piece. Near the end of the game, you have to build the stronger body I mentioned earlier to withstand the higher pressure deeper in the ocean. Your consciousness has to be transferred into that new body, which, well, I'm sure you see where this is going. Simon is not the smartest person in the world, even though there's only like 5 people left. Some say that he's been through a lot, and being plucked from one life into another one so alien that to him, it may as well not count as being on Earth at all, is enough to understand why he has trouble grasping concepts that the player probably won't. There's even one of the best lines in the game that hints at this. It's a really thoughtful take on another, more human perspective on consciousness and what's happening to him.
I never realized how much the idea of myself depended on where I am.
How do you mean?
I miss Toronto. Not because my friends and family are there, but because I know where I fit in. In Toronto, I know who I am.
The other explanation is that this copy of the consciousness isn't as well integrated into the robotic body as it could have been, so it has limited intelligence compared to how well Catherine functions.
I forgot how dull Joseph can sound. I don't think he sounds that dull. I don't personally think he sounds that dull. I think the people that sound really dull kind of sound like this, where they're just kind of reading words off of a script and not really inflecting at any point in the sentence. Also, hi, Chad Migneris. Hello, Andrew. Hello. We're near the end of this video, so we're getting there. He's talked a lot over the past, man, when did we even start this, story bit? 'Cause we've just been watching it for a long time, just because he's not really said a whole lot that I either disagree with or need to make a point on. One thing I guess I should make right now is, I've often wondered what the chances would be like if they, because they consider the Ark as sort of like their last ditch hope, but I'd be kind of curious what would happen if they tried to create a civilization underwater. You know what I mean? Create like procreate, right? Because there were men and women down here, right? So they could procreate, and just try to create more life that way. But I guess the WoW screwing things up probably threw a wrench in that. Or, well, not really a wrench, but more like a bomb. kind of threw a bomb into it. Might just be I've spent the last week either watching Film Threat or Nerdrotic, who are hyper excited. Yeah, that could also be it, right? Just the different inflections of different people and the way they talk. Just kind of depends on who you're watching.
Personally, I just think the guy is a little bit slow. Either way, this doesn't bother me much because you're not limited by what he thinks or says. The handful of decisions you make are still in your control. It's worth bringing up though because Simon doesn't ever grasp the copy and paste part, to the point that Catherine has to lie to him to make him proceed. She explains the transfer as a coin flip, that there's a 50-50 chance that you'll end up in the new body or left behind in the old one. In reality, you're always left behind. The copy and transfer are done at the same time and are written into the new body. This is just her way of placating him. In this scene, you actually become a new Simon. You go through the same process you did in the chair in Toronto, only this go around there's no time lapse. It's immediate.
There must be something wrong. Can't you run a diagnosis or something?
What was that?
So when you start moving around, you hear the old Simon sitting in the chair wondering why he wasn't transferred. You can even go and look at him, look at you, the version that you just were and are now a new copy of a copy of a copy. I think that having just been in control of the old version and then being pushed into a new one, with your control shifting and being taken away from the other Simon, is a really strong moment for a game. This could and has been done in movies and books. Hell, even I've done something like it. More than once actually, now that I think about it, but I think so much is added to the scene by having the player control it all. It's a much more powerful shift because it's your actual perspective that moves, instead of seeing a clone of a character with the same actor on a screen or something like it, and that the old version carries on without you, and you have to think about what you just were and who just took control of that person away from you now that you're not with them anymore.
This is one thing I do want to say. I think that might be one of my favorite sequences in the game, is the whole transferring from, I believe this technically is Simon 2 to Simon 3, right? Like, I really like that sort of section. I think it just brings up so many interesting moral questions during this sequence, as well as I really enjoy the dynamic between Catherine and Simon, where he's really going off on her for what's going on, and like she's told him everything she can, and he's just not accepting it, and she just kind of shrivels up in front of him, and it's sort of pitiful, right? Because she's desperately trying to do something for the sake of what humanity is left, right? And he just can't accept that this is the way things are. And I particularly feel it when she just says, "Please stop," and it's like he's just berating her the entire time, and that "please stop" is just like her just desperately trying to not short circuit and like fuck this whole thing up. It's a really good sequence, I think, for character, for the story, for the concept, and for just dealing with the different elements at play by this point in the story, which will be fun when we get to it. Well, I say fun. It'll probably be depressing to think about, to have to relive it and be like, oh man, this poor Catherine having to put up with this idiot the whole time.
You're not with them anymore. The end of the game has a similar moment that is, in my opinion, a bit less powerful. You arrive at the space gun, which is one of the main functions of Pathos 2, and load the Ark to fire it. Catherine lies to Simon again that they'll be transferred into the Ark just before it fires. This countdown then expires, and of course the copies of Simon and Catherine get to fly off into space. This time our perspective doesn't change. We experience the other side of the transfer for this one. We're the ones left behind. The game ends with Simon screaming in the dark, just like the other Simon we abandoned earlier must go through when he wakes up later.
Catherine?
This is also one of my favorite sequences.
Please don't leave me alone.
He's just left down there alone.
Catherine?
There's a post-credits scene that is surprisingly happy. The Ark makes it to space, you fly off, you have a short scene as the other Simon who is too stupid to see through Catherine's white lies. There's no subtle hint that the Ark is corrupted or anything. Nothing is wrong with it, at least not that I could tell. By now you should have fully accepted the idea that these people are alive, so this is a victory. A strange, albeit minor one since Earth is ruined, but still a victory.
I can't believe we actually made it.
I don't like this ending, not because it's optimistic or anything. I feel that it deflates and doesn't capitalize on the potential of the story.
It doesn't capitalize on the potential of the story. Are you fucking stupid, Joseph? You literally get both outcomes in the ending. You get the ending that shows the Simon being left alone in the dirt, which has been the recurring theme throughout the whole thing. That it's a copy. That you have copied someone, and that person has died at some point. You get to live it at the end of the game. And then you get to see the follow-up version who gets to live on the Ark. And you get a vision of the world as it burns, as our last-ditch hope flies off into the cosmos, supposedly getting power for thousands of years from solar energy and shit. How do you... What the fuck? There it is. I knew Vangelis wasn't going to let that slide. No, it's like... The ending perfectly encapsulates the whole problem of the copy system, right? Like, diegetically, it's that you copied someone. The original is still going to suffer, right? It's like, yeah, Simon and Catherine made it onto the Ark, but the old versions were still down in the deep. And then Catherine short-circuited, so she's pretty much gone, and then Simon's left alone, right? You essentially get the bad ending and the good ending at the same time. You know, and that's basically like the point that one of the points the game has made throughout the entire run. Like, I don't understand how you can't understand that.
Mystic or anything, I feel that it deflates and doesn't capitalize on the potential of the story. I think I've made it clear at this point how much Soma's story succeeds, especially in that the true horror is in these narrative moments instead of gameplay ones. Conceptually, it's a fitting end that our third generation Simon, in our line anyway, ends up alone and probably dead at the bottom of the ocean, and for a while I was happy with that moment of dread being the end of the game before the tease after the credits. But the more I think about it, the more I wish the game went further. I get anxious when I make suggestions because they change a lot of the game. I don't think it's truly fair to propose changes like this, but after criticizing so many games and thinking about them, I can't help but do it sometimes and hope that it's constructive, especially with Soma since I've already said too many times that the monsters in the game fail. There's another big event before finding the space gun. It's like the end to the other half of the game. You reach the heart of the Warden unit and, guided by one of the crazy but maybe not that crazy robot monsters, destroy the AI. It's not a very good moment in the game and drove home to me how much I would have preferred Soma if everything to do with the WoW and its monsters were gone, and the story was different instead. The Ark could still exist, but it could have been people experimenting with creating robot bodies instead of an AI. With all of the work required by Frictional to make the monster saved for something else, that development time...
We know, Joseph, we've seen your Souls videos. Your suggestions completely destroy games. All right, let me go back and try to understand what he's talking about here, because I don't really get what his point is.
That the monsters in the game fail. There's another big event before finding the space gun. It's like the end to the other half of the game. You reach the heart of the Warden unit and, guided by one of the crazy but maybe not that crazy robot monsters, destroy the AI. It's not a very good moment in the game and drove home to me how much I would have preferred Soma if everything to do with the WoW and its monsters were gone, and the story was different instead.
Wait, so he wants the WoW and its placement gone. Why, though? That, I mean, as he said, it radically would change the story if humans were in charge of the duplication of other humans instead of the WoW, which just does it haphazardly. That's part of the problem, right? Is when you give it to a computer what defines a person, it's going to have a very different definition than what we do because there's no emotion. It's like there's a personality in these saved files, copy and paste them everywhere. Apparently that's life, and life multiplying is good, right? It's a very simple algorithmic sort of approach to life existing, right, in that sort of digital space, right? You're not going to have the same effect between people doing it as an AI doing it. It's what do you want? Like, how are humans doing it going to improve the story? That is an anus. That was very clearly a butthole he put in his fist into. Yes. It's the WoW anus.
Everything to do with the WoW and its monsters were gone, and the story was different instead. The Ark could still exist, but it could have been people experimenting with creating robot bodies instead of an AI. With all of the work required by Frictional to make the monster saved for something else, that development time could have been spent on different interactions with people and sites around Pathos 2 that explore more of the ideas surrounding what makes a consciousness. The game could...
I mean, I like how he skips over one of the most emotionally impactful moments in the game, which is when you find that one... Oh, wait, there she is. Maybe he talks about it later, but I'm surprised he didn't bring it up here. It's like, that's one of the... Like, that section right there is one of the most emotional things in the game because she is the last known human to be alive. Right? And the whole conversation with her about how you deal with the fact that, you know, she's the last one alive. You know, she's the last one that's really alive, that is fully human. Right? Like, that whole conversation and what that means is integral to the whole story, because this story is about what defines us as humanity and what do we do if what our previous definition of humanity, what happens when quote unquote real humans die and all that's left is our consciousness in the face of total annihilation as a species. You know, like what comes after that? You know, and I think that's such an interesting question. This game brings up some interesting questions and some interesting answers, right? I think that's part of the charm of the story. I just don't see how, like, I feel like his changes are just going to make it more human drama, like soap opera bullshitty. Like it's going to be more soap opera bullshit as opposed to dealing with higher concepts like the AI and shit. It's going to have a mustache twirling villain. Makes me think of Cassandra. I'm Doctor Who's just being a flat piece of skin and is the last real human. Yeah.
Pathos 2 that explore more of the ideas surrounding what makes a consciousness. The game could have continued on after firing the Ark for another hour or two with a different ending, with Simon finally understanding and working on resolving some of the issues in the base, because things aren't strictly speaking hopeless. Pathos 2 was almost self-sufficient, and with the notes you can find in some of the bases showing that they could resort to catching fish for food, you can begin to see how humanity didn't have to go extinct after all. The main plot point could have been Catherine and the others splicing together new people from bits and pieces of different scans. Simon can be one of the first ones they make from the legacy section. And there could still be a lot of scares here to explore if some of the hybrid scans don't turn out as well as they hoped. This would effectively be a way that Catherine tries to repopulate the planet with robot bodies that can withstand the wrecked conditions on the surface, or the people creating multiple copies of themselves for a bigger workforce, and how different factions comprised of multiples of the same people could form. There's a lot of cool potential for a story here. Played now, there are moments in the game that require the player to make a choice. Some of these aren't as clearly presented to you as others. There's other stuff like that in the game too. The game screws with your head a bit. Corpses will move when you leave a room and come back to it. This bloody door is closed when you first arrive at this area. Later it's open like something got out. Little things like this, which are ultimately meaningless for scares or dangers, is something you might not even notice. I'm sure there are a couple that I didn't.
Meaningless for scares or dangers. It's like, that's an obvious, the way he words things hurts my brain. It's like that thing changed, so something may have come out of it or gone into it. That's a subtle horror trope. You fuck nugget. Oh, man. Also, his whole spiel about like recombining people and stuff like that is interesting. Like there's a concept there that could have been explored, right? If you were to add an extra element to the story, I think there is a worthwhile element of saying some people agreed with the Ark. Some people wanted to try to keep humanity alive in its flesh and blood form. You know, like they may try procreating, they would try finding ways to produce food, create shelters, to produce more humans. You know, there are ways to do things, right? But it's one of the things where a lot of this is wrapped up in sort of the way the WoW perceives life, right? And the WoW existing, I don't think you can have the WoW effectively exist without rewriting the way it works, and also having another section of humans trying to procreate naturally. I think there's an issue there, because the WoW is just copy and pasting, consciousnesses into anything, and those are creating problems. Those are creating monsters that go around and cause damage and, kill other people. right? So it's that weird thing of you could rewrite the story to include an element where humanity tries to continue in its current form, but at the same time, I think that would kind of get in the way of the overall theme of this, as well as come into conflict with the way the WoW operates. So I think there's an idea there that could be interesting, but they'd have to significantly tweak things in the base game story to make that happen. There must be some protocol that stops him understanding, like in Doctor Who, whenever they remove inhibitions on Cybermen, they break down because being transformed traumatizes them. Yeah, I mean, it's very clear that the WoW does something kind of like that in a way where it copies people and pastes them into an environment that sometimes they can't handle. And when they snap, they either shut down, like with Catherine's case at the end, or they go insane and become sort of like hulking just creatures of habit, you know, and they're not really like personalities anymore. They're just kind of like basic instincts. I don't know. It's weird.
Didn't catch. They contributed a lot to the feeling of unease for me and was a much more effective way of creeping me out rather than monsters and jump scares. And I have to wonder if they're still effective even if you're not consciously aware of them. The choices you can make involve killing the last human you find on life support. She asks to be killed. You can also kill your old self after you're copied and pasted into the new body. You're also given the choice to kill a living robot or a helper drone in one part so you can salvage a piece of tech from them to proceed. These choices don't change anything, but they still made me stop and think, and the potential was there for some really thoughtful situations if the story had been built around them.
The story is built around them. All of these deal with the same concept of humanity being copy and pasted and how you justify killing one thing that you perceive as human versus, you know, ending what could be considered just a robot. The questions are still there. It's just your dumbass refused to ask them. It's like, what the fuck? What he's suggesting would be a completely different game, essentially a base building survival type thing. Kind of, but I mean, there's potential there, but just the way he's phrasing it makes it sound way worse than what its potential could be. I would love to know what Joseph's ideal horror game is. Well, I think he goes over it in his why horror isn't scary or something video or whatever it is, or something like that, but I don't want to watch that. Anyway, let's see how he ends this video.
Potential was there for some really thoughtful situations if the story had been built around them. More interactions and decisions instead of hide and seek with monsters.
This is one of those things where it seems like he doesn't want to play horror games for the actual like scary encounters with monsters. He just wants to be he wants the story and the themes, but not the actual like gameplay mechanics, it seems, which is weird. I'd say the themes in this game are much scarier than dealing with monsters, etc. I mean, I'd fully agree with that. I mean, the themes are the things that are most... the themes and the characters' interactions with those themes and ideas are the greatest aspect of Soma. I'd say it's a game that heavily relies on its storytelling. You know, whether it be directly or conceptually or through, like, environmental storytelling, right? There's so much interesting shit to have happen in this game that you can talk about, but he keeps zeroing in on just the very obvious like horror elements with the set pieces and the enemies there when they only pop up here and there. It's not like Outlast where the main horror is just a guy going blah, blah, blah in your face every time. And I know I keep referencing it over and over, but like Outlast is a good example of a bad horror game because it does the same shit over and over and over with the exact same result over and over and over. You know, this game is giving you an idea of something terrifying that isn't locked to just a physical thing. It's a conceptual. It makes you question things about your own existence, your own consciousness, your own place in the current world that has ended for basically every other human being besides the copies, right? Like, it makes you think. You know, and horror is best when we have to think about it. And I'll stand by that. It sounds like he really, really wants everything to be on the nose and shoved down your throat almost. It kind of seems like that, yeah.
More interactions and decisions instead of hide and seek with monsters. More conversations and goals about finding a solution to the last humans being stuck at the bottom of the ocean instead of destroying a misguided AI. Soma is a great experience even if I question how successful it is as a game. In the end, I can't help but wonder how much of it was lost by forcing monsters into the story, like it wasn't confident enough to stand on its own. which is a real shame because even sort of mangled as it is today, it still managed to be something special.
If not, you still have...
All right, so that's it, apparently. All right. You know it's bad when even Markiplier understands why Soma was so good, yet Joseph can't. I know a guy that is known for just being loud and sort of semi-obnoxious on the internet and overreacting to video games. When he has a better grasp on a video game than someone who is paid to be a critic of it, you know there are problems. Like it wasn't confident enough to stand on its own. Vangelis, please don't do it. Please let him make it. No. Yeah, I mean, it's just the... yeah. It's just, just left a sour taste in my mouth. It makes me angry. Makes me angry. It also just kind of annoyed me just with some of the shit he was saying, you know. The end of Markiplier's playthrough was really emotional, watching him take that moment and explain. Yeah. Well, I mean, like if actually, I could pull this up right now, since we're sort of talking about this. I remember I went on a rant, or not a rant, but I guess it counts as a rant. Like, I went on a rant going over Soma at the end of my initial playthrough, right? And I went over a lot of the elements of the game that I really liked. And I'm curious now. I wonder if actually, would you guys like to see the rants that I had at the end of my Soma series? I don't know how long it is, but I could try to find it. Insert Professor Farnsworth saying, "I don't want to live on this planet anymore." Yeah. Let me find some stuff here. Oh, man. Blah, 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 blah. Of course we would. I figured you would. It'd be a little old, because I forget exactly when the... I forget exactly when the walkthrough came out, because I re-uploaded everything, like, way later, so I need to find out exactly. Let's see. We're going to have a weird... We're going to have a weird sort of experience here. Can't forget that Vangelis will be giving himself to us tomorrow, too. Yes, we will be playing the game again. All right, so I don't think this rant is very long. It's about, I think, like 8 minutes or so, but I'll let it play here. Let me get this set up. Here we go. So this is the end of my best of for Soma, which was like the compilation of all my reactions to things. Can't forget that Vangelis... Okay, yeah. While you're doing that, how are you getting on with Lord of the Rings books? I'm on the second part of the Two Towers, Frodo and Sam going through the marsh with Gollum. That's actually interesting that you brought that up. So, yeah, I'm in Two Towers as well. I just finished the chapter where we met Treebeard, and the Ents had the Entmoot, and they start charging off to Isengard. I just finished that chapter. So that's where I'm at now. The pacing of Two Towers feels very strange, you know, because I heard it said by on EFAP by Wolf that the pacing of Two Towers is kind of weird because like the first half is like all of sort of like Aragorn's sort of side of the story with Pippin, Merry, Rohan and stuff, and the other half is like Sam and Frodo, and I've been really feeling that. Like it feels like reading the book nowadays feels strange because it's like the first book has a certain sort of linearity to the way its story works. I say first book, but Fellowship has a certain linearity to it that you can understand, and it like flows pretty well. Two Towers has we've just basically completely forgotten about Sam and Frodo, like, and what they're doing for like several chapters. Like, I forget what Treebeard chapter is, like, in the grand scheme of things, but like, it feels like we've gone through, like, I think I'm in like the 90s page range. It's like we've gone 90 pages into this story and we haven't talked about Frodo, and it feels like a really weird pacing issue on Tolkien's part. Like I'm working on a book series actually myself, and one thing that I'm a big fan of is I like the way movies have it, where if you've got multiple plot lines going, you have a scene or two dealing with that particular plot line, then you jump over here to deal with this other plot line, then you jump back to this other main plot line, or maybe you jump to a third plot line, whatever. I like the jumping back and forth, like per chapter, like in book form, where you kind of have a chapter that's like, okay, this is this plot line going, then maybe the next chapter is an extension of that, or maybe it's a new plot line going, different stuff like that. And so, like, reading Two Towers is kind of weird because it's been so ultra focused on like Aragorn, Gimli, Legolas, Pippin, Merry, and Treebeard, and that's kind of been its own sort of thing for such a long time that it's sort of like I get antsy the more I read of that part, because it's like I want to get back to Frodo. I want to see how they're doing. Like it's like tell me this, Andrew, because I know you've read it. Is like if the Frodo section starts right after they like get in the boat and sail down the river, I forget the name of it, like at the end of Fellowship, if that's where that ends, or if that's where that begins, right, and then we have to kind of catch up in the timeline again, that's going to feel kind of weird unless they make references to stuff in the other parts. Like, it just, I don't know, just the pacing of it feels kind of weird. And I know that it was written like in what it was written in like the 40s and 30s, I think, and it came out in the 50s, like 54 or something. So I get that it's a very old book, right? And it was written in a different way than we would write now, but it still feels very strange to have like, here's plot A and here's plot B. Literally, this is the A part of the book, this is the B part of the book. It feels very weird. And also I feel like, just the choosing of which one is also kind of strange. Yeah, it's strange, but the books make you realize how much they cut or changed. Yeah, that is true. My book set, it's hard to judge the page numbers since all three books follow on. So the first page of the Two Towers is page 401 on my set. Oh yeah. Yeah, the set I have is like the complete like Tolkien, not the complete Tolkien, but like the complete story of the Hobbits is pretty much. So it's got The Hobbit as its own book, and then Fellowship as its own book, then Two Towers as its own book, then Return of the King as its own book. So that's the way my set is. I'm on, yeah, and I think I'm on. I think the Treebeard chapter ends at like page 90, like 1 or 2 or something like that, maybe 90 even. In Two Towers, but the main point is that there's a long stretch where we just kind of forget about Frodo and just focus on the other stuff, which is kind of odd. They don't reference the other parts. It essentially gives you the Two Towers section from one POV of the Fellowship, then the other POV in the timeline. Yeah. And I get having different POVs. It's just I would much rather that we keep things sort of semi-chronological and we bounce back and forth throughout. Hey, chat. Hey, Shan. Oh, we're glad you're here. You're a little late because we finished the Joseph Anderson video. And now we're going to watch my little rant at the end of finishing Soma myself. So let's see... Let's see what I said about this. I forgot. Also, one thing that I'm really mad about that I didn't think about until after I took down my videos and re-uploaded them is all of their quality got bumped down to 720p when I downloaded them from YouTube. So I lost some bit rate for like re-uploads and stuff, and it's like, no. Hi, Shane, not to be confused with Shane. How was it? The first 15 minutes gave us an aneurysm. The rest of it was kind of just watching him explain the story, and then the last like third of it was us kind of complaining about the way he worded things and his changes that he would have made to the story. I think that pretty much sums up what it was. And you can go back and rewatch it when I re-upload this. But it was not great, I think is the wording I would put it under. Not great. But now we're going to see sort of my sort of my ending initial playthrough for Soma. So if you guys are ready, we'll get into it. Also, I'm probably just going to be quiet here, so this might be a bit where I just kind of let it play, because I don't. It's going to be weird talking over myself from the past. So, just FYI. Wait, aren't we supposed to be in an orbit? Why did we why did we just fly off? Thought we were supposed to go into an orbit. I mean, that's a nice ending and all, but still, it's like, shouldn't that have, you know? That was such a cool experience to go through that game. You know, just to go through that campaign with Simon and to see, you know, it's like, because the thing that's interesting about it to me is like the Simon we knew from the beginning, he passed away. And Simon 2, you know, we had to kill him because he would not be able to deal with the situation. And Simon 3 still wasn't able to deal with the situation, but he ended up saving Simon 4 and everyone else. But now he's stuck in the pit, you know, in the abyss, all alone. And I don't even know if he'll be able to fix the thing where Catherine can come back to be with him, even in like hope. And I'm wondering, because when we had the Brandon Wan thing where he would stress out too much and the simulation would end, I'm wondering if that was enough to kick Catherine over where her simulation stopped. Or not her simulation, but her like activity on the Omni tool. I wonder if that kicked her off of it, where she's like permanently gone. You know, it's the thing that really makes, I think, every human wonder about it. You know, it's like, what happens when life ends? You know, what really happens when life ends? Because until you actually die and you cross over, you don't really know. You know, and it doesn't matter what you believe, but like you just don't know. And I guess that's the thing that really kind of makes it interesting to think about, because it's like I noticed a lot of people view death as kind of, you know, it's you know, pain, it's suffering, you know, it's the end of your existence, and it's like even if you didn't believe in a higher power, you know, which I mean, I'm a Christian and I believe in that, you know, higher power that is God, but like it still just kind of boggles my mind that it's like, if that weren't true, would death be so bad? Because it's the end of existence. You know, it's not the beginning of pain. It's not the, you know, it's not the end of good. It's not the beginning of pain. It's just the end. You know, it's like, you know, it's like a film coming to an end. You know, you reach the end and it just stops. There's nothing else. There's no continuation of anything. It's just, you know, there's nothing there. You know, there's no pain. There's no joy. There's no life. There's no, you know, there's no light. There's no dark. There's just nothing. You know, it ends, and that's the end of the track. It doesn't progress any farther. You can't feel anything negative. You can't feel anything positive. And that's just, man, just this game, man. This game just got me thinking about so much just cool shit, man. I gotta say, like, looking back on playing Amnesia and Soma so close together, because I played them so close together, kind of within months of each other, just really kind of going over the experience I had. Amnesia, I would say, was a game that had a better that had better gameplay,
in terms of the mechanics, because where I stand from, I would normally say that the more mechanics you have, the better the game is. In terms of enjoyment quality. But Soma's story is really thought-provoking, and really, it really makes you think about, what is humanity, what is existence, what is worth sacrificing for existence, as well as the idea of, like, if you could die for another version of yourself to carry on, would you do it? And it bridges that line between life and death, where it's like, I may die, but I also carry on in another state. It's like it brings up so many philosophical questions about, what is consciousness, what is you, and that's one thing that, like, at the end of Amnesia, I was happy, that the story ended the way that, however, it did, with the multiple endings. As far as I can tell, you only get one ending in Soma, definitively anyway. Although technically you get two, because there's the positive and the negative, but that's the same ending you get regardless of what you do. So it's like, as far as I could tell, but just this game really blended a lot of things really well, and I think the story is the strongest aspect of Soma. And the thing is, because the story is so deep and thought-provoking, I feel like it's going to go over some people's heads, because some people just experience a game of getting from A to B, and some people don't really absorb everything in the game. But I absorbed a lot of it, and I probably missed some stuff, but even with the stuff that I missed, I gotta say, this was a, if you had to one-up Amnesia in a memorable experience, I would have to say that this is it. This is, I heard a lot of people think that this game wasn't that great. People thought it was bad, thought it was terrible, thought it was subpar, and thought it was, not as good as Amnesia. And I think the opposite, because I feel like Amnesia, when you finish Amnesia, you come away thinking that you are satisfied, that the story is over. Daniel survives, or Daniel passes and he lives on in the afterlife, or whatever ending you got, or whichever ending you choose to go along with. But with Soma, with this ending, you're no longer thinking about the game. You're thinking about, concepts and where things go and where things could go. You wonder about Simon 4 and what life he lives on the Ark with Catherine and all the others. You wonder about, how Simon 1 was feeling, after the scan and when he died. You think about Simon 2's thoughts before getting shut down, how terrifying that must be. And I'd say at the lowest end of the scale, in terms of just pure depression, you got to wonder how Simon 3 is feeling, being left alone in the pit after being promised, that he'd be on the Ark, which the promise is true, and he may come to terms with that. But even if he does come to terms with that, that version of him still didn't make it onto the Ark, and that's terrifying to think about. And I'm just, Frictional Games deserves a pat on the back for this game. They deserve they deserved all the success with Amnesia that they should have gotten for this game. Like, they really should have. They should be proud of what they've done. They should be.
All right. There was my take from the Wii years ago. I believe I probably recorded this around 2018 or 19, because that was back when I had like a hard schedule on a single channel. So this would have been 2018 or 19. So this is yeah. Oh my goodness, Vangeris, you sound so young here. How many decades ago was this? Young Vangeris with the glaze. Wow, this is a new take. Yeah, things have changed. Things have changed a lot. But yeah. You can probably tell too, this was before I had sex and had a child. So it's funny. But yeah, that was my initial sort of reaction to Soma, and as I've thought about it more, I think I've come to appreciate it even more. It's just it's a fun game, and I'm looking forward to playing it for you guys. I don't know exactly when I'm going to play it tomorrow. I'll probably start it maybe around this time tomorrow. I'm not sure yet. Need to figure it out, but I should be free tomorrow. So if something comes up that prevents it from happening tomorrow, I will let y'all know. But we will be playing Soma at some point. So it shall be a doozy. It shall be a doozy. And I'm looking forward to playing through it again, because then we can go encounter by encounter. Because it's kind of fun to go back through a game after you watch someone praise it or criticize it, because it's a weird thing of where you can kind of go through it and get your opinions across sort of in real time, as it were. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. Sadly, I do have to end the stream and go back to my livelihood. I have plans I need to enact and do things with. But thank you all for being here during this time. I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. And look out for a stream tomorrow. And I'm not sure how long it'll take us to beat Soma across the streams, because I was able to beat the game in about 8 hours. So I'm not sure if it'll take longer or shorter, since I've kind of refreshed on the game. So we'll have to see how it goes. No, why did you say it? But yeah, we should be able to finish Soma by next weekend, hopefully. I don't know if we're going to need 3 streams for it or 2. We'll see. Kind of depends on how long I can stream. And I'm really hoping that I can get this done by next weekend, because I'm going to be gone the weekend of the 19th. I will be busy, so I won't be able to do much with y'all. Or actually, wait, no, it's the 26th. I forget. I've got something I need to. I need to check my calendar. I have something. I need to have like a assistant with me. That's like, okay, this is when I do shit. Okay, my bad. I will be available the 19th. I just won't be available the 26th. Okay, that's what I was trying to say, but was very poor at managing my time. Shall look forward to the re-upload and hopefully see you tomorrow. Knowing you'll do it in like 3 hours. No, Soma, I'll be able to. I'll probably take it a little slower, just because there are things to talk about while we do things. But we'll see how it goes. But for now, I will see you all tomorrow and later on into the future. So, doodle pip cheerio, gents.